Good afternoon. Let's get started with our board workshop, Thursday, March 22nd, 1:31. Glad to see we have a clock here. It keeps us all on track. Yes. I'm going to keep looking over where Jackson is for last week's clock. But it's nice to see that. First item on the agenda is to adopt the agenda. We have a proposed agenda, 1:30 to 4 o'clock. We will end no later than 4, perhaps before. Any items to add or modify with the agenda?
Did you want to add something?
None? Okay.
I do.
Please, go ahead.
Oh, it's on.
Under closure on strategic planning and goal areas assignments, I mentioned before
Yeah.
about coming off the events plan, the events committee.
Okay, so let's,
And also, I want to make sure that, we discuss, we talk about safety in the neighborhood regarding events, but I'm concerned we have absolutely no police presence available to us anymore. Okay? I know the CDD hires somebody. I haven't seen him in weeks walking around.
Excuse me, Jack, could you speak up? I can't hear him.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I would like to have us go forward with the West 192 captain and talk to him about getting a greater police presence in Celebration, because I fail to see the Zone 21 deputy anywhere. And I don't believe that the current deputy hired by the CDD is doing his job.
so let's add to the agenda, as we talk about strategic planning and goal area assignments, related to that, I know we had security within one of the goal areas. Let's see if that fits there, but let's make sure we cover those. And then the events committee, let's make sure we talk about the roles on various committees.
At the end, if we have a minute, I think
Yeah.
it would be great to get an update on the CCDD meeting of last night.
Right. What I would hope, just in that framework, and I'll come back to you, within that framework, what I would hope is that I'm going to propose some timelines on each of these so that item number 1 doesn't take an hour and a half, et cetera. And that one of my hopes is that we would finish the printed agenda by 3:30 so we can debrief a little bit, and also a few other updates like the CDD meeting from last night. And you have something?
And it may be best at 3:30. Just a couple things that have come in from owners over the past week and a half of some comments to discuss.
Right. And I have 4 things that have been as part of our dialogue among the board. The pressure wash demo, the CIA legal update session, the Florida legal updates. We've had 2 that we read on, and the CJC meeting. And then now we'll also have the CDD meeting from last night. And
Okay.
anything else that's come up.
If you want to put it all together, just as typical emails or the emails that came in that we've all had a chance to review. Something came in from one owner regarding technology, something came in about a 7-Eleven, something, just little things if we can have small conversations.
Let's make sure we're all, and that's, some of that will be subsumed under response to resident requests.
Perfect.
So we'll make sure we cover that. And then also to debrief how it works. One of the things we did in strategic planning last week is rather than have an owner comment period at the beginning, we'll infuse that throughout. So as we're talking about strategic planning, if someone has something to say, we'll do that, as long as that's okay, unless someone has an owner comment to make right now.
I just have a request.
Okay.
It's about the word special events committee, which I believe is, you recommend that the group you put together.
Okay, so we're, something about special events committee?
Right, I mean, I thought I was on, we have a special events committee, and I keep getting confused.
It's a celebration events task force.
Oh, the task force. I think you're talking about the security task force.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Special events committee, of which there is another. No?
No relation.
No, there's no relation, but I believe you just used the term special events committee to.
Did I miss it? Did I misspeak? I meant to say community events committee.
It's the special, the community events task
The
force.
community events task force is what he was referring to.
But you some people tend to say special events committee.
And those are 2 different things, very different things.
Yes.
That was your point?
Yes.
Just to make sure, okay,
Yes, but we just.
got it. So it's not events committee, it's events, got it.
Also on the agenda, we need to agree the what we're going to strive for next week's agenda too, right?
Absolutely. That's one of my later items, and I have a printout proposal for us. All right, so what I propose, just on our timeline, the closure on strategic planning and goal area assignments, 20 to 30 minutes. Interlocal agreement, maximum 60 minutes. Is this okay as a starting point? Discussion on ARC covenants and appeals, max of 30 minutes. And then the management issues, max of 30 minutes. All of that does add up past 3:30. I know that. Hopefully we don't exceed our max, and that will give us plenty of time. So first item is closure on strategic planning. Last week we had a good discussion. I shared with you as an advanced planner this document, which we all have somewhere, or it's on the board.
It should be on the board.
Okay, it's on the board. So I shared, all I did with this is, as you see, we had 6 clusters in our goal areas. I tried some rewording so that those could live beyond the clusters that were working titles. I also embedded the goals that we had from prior years, just so you see the wording. And then what's below each of those yellow segments were ideas that we had brainstormed. It doesn't commit us to those, just because we said parking solutions would be an item, or third-party solutions, or engagement with social media. It doesn't mean we necessarily have to cover those this year. Those were a brain dump from last week. Are we in agreement on that? Okay, so it was just to give us an idea. And then, so first step that I see is looking at these goal areas and following up from last week. Is this what we want to subscribe to, the 6 areas? And then if so, is the wording okay, what I've highlighted in yellow as a working draft? I just wanted to jumpstart our discussion.
Once it comes up.
Once it comes back up. There we go.
Press the log button down and I'll get rid of that new software install.
So
Just about there you go.
the first goal area, I just rewrote it as review and update Parks and Facilities Master Plan. And I separated parks and facilities because there may be facilities that aren't necessarily parks per se. So is that what we want to agree to as a goal area? And then the wording, which is in yellow.
I think that covers it.
And is there anything that we see today that we want to add within that team would take the lead on and helping to figure out?
I do have something as
Please.
a suggestion.
Sure.
I think the intent behind this was to actually review the master plan and update that as needed for maybe a new needs assessment in the community, a new stakeholder meeting, those types of things. So I know we talk about the 2 big items that are on the front of everybody's mind right now, but I think that once we accomplish these items and move those forward, what do we do with the rest of the master plan? How do we reprioritize, and what are you going to do with the future funding that's coming in for it?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I agree, and additionally, we said if Island Village comes on, how's that going to affect the master plan as we go out past 2020? So I think that plays in.
And that will dovetail with our second goal, which does specifically talk about Island Village before it comes on. It's the planning before it comes on. As we're doing this, one of the things that has been done historically, if this board chooses to continue in that spirit, is 2 people have taken the lead on this, on each item. It's just a matter of leading some of the discussions, or ensuring that we have it on the agenda, or helping push some background research or background data collection or processes. So it doesn't mean that 2 people are doing it alone. It just means 2 would be taking the lead. Is that how we still want to operate? Is that okay? I mean, all of us are involved in all of this. Please.
Are there any guidelines for how those individuals report back and what the constraints are? And I'm saying this because there were obviously times in the past when individuals took this charge from the board and perhaps extended it beyond what might have been expected and didn't communicate back. So what are the boundaries? What are the regulations or the rules or the guidelines for how that should operate?
I think we develop those. I think what's happened what I've seen happen in the past is the goals have been at the end of the agenda, and often the agendas are so long that we're all tired at the end of the meetings, and so we are very brief with that. One of the things I would like us to discuss, doesn't have to be today, but at a future workshop, is how do we want to integrate those goals more actively for us as a board? And maybe that's at the beginning of our meetings, or maybe that's in committee reports, whatever we want to call it. So, like, what do we want to report on or ask on? But in terms of guidelines, I think it's taking the lead and bringing it back to the whole board. The whole board is the decision body.
Dave, I had another thought on
Please.
that. I think you and I had a little discussion about this, but as you're taking your strategic plan and you're putting it together for the year, you've already identified 2 or 3 topics from the strategic plan, or the hottest topics that need to be addressed now over the next 2 weeks through the workshops. I think it makes sense to go through that process with this entire strategic plan and say, what time frame do we want to address this throughout the year? Maybe it's something that's ongoing all year. Maybe it's a priority that we move to next month's workshops. But as you do that, then you can have those reports at the workshops, because remember, the workshops were supposed to be you working through it as a board with resident input. Maybe it's so big it needs the town hall, where it's a complete engagement with the community, and it fits into that category. But if we categorize it like that, we can pretty much lay out our plan for the entire year of what we're going to be talking about, when we're going to be talking about. Now, some things may come up throughout the year that need to be added. We just figure out where they fit there.
I don't know that answers your question. I don't know that there is an answer. I don't know that we have formal guidelines.
I just want to make sure that we're all clear on what those guidelines are. It appeared as a member of the audience last year, from the outside, that there was distinct disagreement about what the roles were of some of those individuals with respect to these 2 people leading it, and what they could and couldn't do, and what they needed to report back or not report back, and what decisions they were either obligating or intending to obligate the board to. And I appreciate the fact that you're saying that the board is the decision maker. I would just like for any of us that take on these roles to know what the guardrails are. How far do we go? How far should we go? What should our reporting relationships be? So that there's not this kind of miscommunication of somebody trying to act in good faith, but being understood as being off book, doing what they wanted to do without the board's knowledge as a whole. Does that make sense?
I think it's helpful for management too, because we'll be working hand in hand with the leaders of these different groups. So as the direction set in these workshops or these town hall meetings or even board meetings, wherever it comes from, we're moving forward. The leaders of that group and management are moving forward with that direction. If it starts moving outside of that direction, it would come back to a workshop to get more clear clarification on, are we going the right direction? Do we need to change? So
for this process, before we put names on, let's look at all 6 and then come back to names. So we refresh ourselves with what the 6 are, so that Kevin doesn't assign up for 4 of them.
You don't get a bad
quick.
category.
Or we assign Vonda all of them. All right, so are we okay with the first one? All right, second one was engage in planned and futuristic growth of Celebration. We had talked about that with respect to Island Village and the planning that we're hearing from Mattamy, parking solutions, what that might be, and then we put green technologies under here.
Do we want to possibly consider what's going on Celebration Boulevard as well, whether or not we have any power there, but certainly we may have some influence in
Put
some
that
way.
on the items to look at. You're talking about the development, the CDD, and
The commercial development along Celebration
the
Boulevard.
7-Eleven, the McDonald's, the
Yes, because there's a lot of resident concern about
Yeah.
what's going in there,
So it's-
some input. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think even though we're identifying these now, as the year goes on, other things will emerge within that cluster.
So I added it. You want
Please,
to add- okay.
growth on Celebration Boulevard. Great. Is that okay? Okay, title? Okay. Item 3, communications. Identify and implement a range of communication strategies to engage residents. Is that okay as a goal?
Yes.
Looks good.
Okay. Item 4, relationships with other entities, whether it's the school, the foundation, the county, the police, the whomever. CDD, condo associations, we talked about last time. Okay. Community well-being, we wanted to call that last time and decided not to, the safety and security. So identify and promote services to maintain quality of life for residents. And I tried to put all these into action terms, action words.
I don't think
Please.
that events doesn't cover it all. Okay, events is just specific to a certain day. My issue is safety throughout our community right now.
Okay.
Today, tomorrow, the next day.
Car break-ins.
Well, not even
Whatever.
break-ins, I'm talking about traffic. I'm talking
Okay.
about speeding, I'm talking about not stopping at stop signs.
So actually, so traffic is an issue in and of itself. It's not because of events, it's just traffic.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. So
It
let's
existed
separate.
long before the event started.
So, seems to me there's community safety, there's also traffic as a separate item. So events have their own things.
So does that make sense to traffic?
Traffic and safety?
Do we want to use the word safety? I think that's what was brought up.
Well, or do you want to label it just events? Maybe you can broaden it so it's not just events. I mean, it's the community.
Events has unique things happening with it.
Yeah.
So there's
I think you
safety
could
in
still be
general,
on
there's
both.
traffic
Yeah.
in general, there's events that bring in extra crowds. Can you just add 2 items? So the title,
Well, all that's being handled by what you're doing.
Well,
Task force.
the meeting we had yesterday primarily dealt with events, like town center events,
town center events or, okay.
or, yeah,
Right.
general community events that primarily took place downtown, but there are other things that may come up, like Halloween and
And
those
we'll
types
talk
of
about
things.
that. I'm going to propose we talk about some of that
Yeah.
next week
Yeah.
when we look at some survey data from
Yes,
February.
I
yes.
think we were talking about taking an approach of, if you can come up with a plan that addresses the big daddy, big events, the monster ones, you can scale them down for every other event that you have.
Yep.
So I think we've identified what are those really large events have the biggest impact.
But I also think Jack's point is.
It's just overall.
So we have traffic, and then we also have safety in our community.
Which the cameras addressed specifically for that one section, but I'm trying to think of a way to say it without saying, because the reason why you're cautioned by your legal counsel, and you know how attorneys are always going to caution you this way, but when you give a false sense of security or safety and something happens, there's liability there, and that's what we've been told. It doesn't mean you can't look at cameras, you can't look at traffic, you can't look at the placement of additional sheriff deputies in town, those types of things,
Right.
but do we want to identify them specifically? Here's the things under safety that we want to look at, because I know cameras was one. Do you want to look at traffic flow?
Yeah, look at traffic.
Do you want to look at,
It's not just traffic flow. What I'm talking about is, I see people failing to stop at stop signs all the time. I see people parking in the wrong directions. I see speeding. Okay, I look at a radar detector in North Village, I'm seeing 39 and 40 miles an hour through there.
So
And what I'm
traffic,
not seeing is anybody on a daily basis ever looking at celebrations.
is that too much, or is that?
it's okay for the outline,
It's-
Running
put
stop
an end-
signs?
Put an N in there.
put an N under
Not stop sign. Six.
sheriff with 1 R.
Violations,
Violations?
There you go.
covers all.
Yeah,
Increased sheriff, okay.
1 R.
Just 1 R for sheriff. Does that cover your,
Yeah.
for now?
That'll-
Okay,
that'll help.
Okay. please.
I think, as far as liability goes, I think as long as we're okay, as long as we don't tell people that we're going to protect you. Then when you get into that, you got specific liability, but general liability, I mean, we can take all the precautions we want, but we're not indicating to the general public, that we're protecting you. And when you do that, that's when you get into a real specific liability issue.
Especially since that scope falls to the sheriff's department within Osceola County.
Okay,
And
go ahead.
let me just remind you, at least for me, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not offering legal advice here. I don't know if you want to make that same statement.
Oh, no, I'm definitely, I've mentioned that before, CROA is not my client, and anything that, we can discuss things that deal with legal issues, but what we have to do, though, if we have a question about it, we need to refer it to the counsel for CROA. Yeah.
Okay, anything else on that one? Let's look at the last one then, which is review, update, and implement quality administrative services. We were calling that legal and management. So I hope that that's all within there.
One of the things that we talked about too is under data security, possible scan cards for the building, for the 851 building. So
Okay.
we can identify who's accessed what room. So
That-
we have scan cards throughout the community, just implementing them here.
Okay. Please.
Would this also include, and my question's really probably for Steve, would this also include a discussion of the relationship between CCMC and Evergreen with respect to data and resident cards and information records right now in Artisan Park? So in other words, can this goal be a way that we look at how CCMC interacts with other entities that may have some overlap in their responsibility for identifying residents?
Yeah, and I think it would be from a standpoint of how your management team, CCMC, oversees the established contracts that are in place with other entities, which would be Evergreen managing Artisan Park.
Okay, and is that covered in what we've got up there, or is that part of the management consultants' work? I'm just trying to make sure that
Just
we're
put a new bullet.
scope.
Put a new
Well,
bullet.
I mean, it's almost the same with landscaping contract, with your pool cleaning contract. It's just ensuring that the contracts are being
Any
met.
contract.
So I don't know if we.
Could we word it that broadly?
Why don't we do that? Why don't we put one there,
Oversight of
of contracts,
contracts.
or review contracts? I mean,
Oversight and review.
there
of
may be other
contracts.
issues with contracts in general.
Thank you.
All right, are we at closure on these 6? Can we assign ourselves to whatever we want to assign ourselves to, 1, 2, or 3? It doesn't work out mathematically easy.
I'll volunteer for the one, was it number 3? Dealt with
Communication
interagency?
strategies?
No, keep going. Maybe it's 4.
The well-
That one, number 4.
Okay.
This one, right? Community well-being.
Well, community well-being. I guess I'm already on that in a way.
Relationship with other entities?
Come to think, I can do that one. And
Here for one,
Which, yes,
the first one.
oh, number 1, okay.
or you're gonna need 2 people for each one. That's what we said
Generally
about it.
2 would do it.
I thought we'd agreed Vaughn was on all 7.
We're starting there, Vaughn's the lead.
If we don't step in, Vaughn gets the slot.
Oh, I'm gonna lead now on that one.
Yes.
Okay.
You volunteered first.
I would propose that we not have one person as a lead, but we have co-leads,
Okay.
just so it's just.
It's important, if one of them can't make the meeting, that the other one at least will be there and can get the information.
So under community well-being, which is about safety, security, parking, police, we have Vaughn and someone else want to.
Okay.
Were you?
Do we want to go back to 1 and
Let's go
work
back
our
to,
way
let's
down
go
the
back to
list?
1 and work our way.
Maybe the easiest way to do this.
Jack is interested in the Parks and Facilities Master Plan. Someone else?
I will be happy to be on number 1 with Jack.
Great. The future growth of Celebration Boulevard.
That sounds like
Island
a great
Village.
Kevin.
I think Kevin
I like
has
the next one, but yeah, I mean,
Kevin
I'm
has
not
his-
against it.
Kevin has, I'm happy to be on that, but I don't want to take anyone else's place.
I'm just typing, so don't shoot the messenger. If you want me to change it, I can change it.
David, do you want to do communications with me? You could lead, I'll do second. Or communications.
Or you
I'm
want?
interested in that one as well, so it's up to you.
Well, put 3 on it then.
Yeah,
I
it
put
doesn't
3
hurt.
of us on it for now.
Debbie, David, and Kevin?
Relationship with other entities, CDD,
I'll volunteer for that.
right?
No. To keep it even, drop me off of number 3. So
Okay.
Number 4 for right now.
Email.
They are,
Okay.
they're similar.
There's overlap.
Yeah.
Did you say you want 4?
Yes. Other entities?
Vaughn and Kevin. Number 5 is Vaughn and, that's community well-being, that's safety.
I'll do it, Vaughn.
Great. And number 6, legal and management.
For sure.
How about Jackson and Jackson, so we can round it out?
Like a law from PA. Jackson and Jackson.
Jackson is 1?
Vaughn, can you help?
I'll be happy to be part of that.
Do you want to be somewhere else?
Jackson and Brian.
Jackson, you want to be somewhere else also, or no?
No, I'm happy with that.
Okay. We'll give you other duties as assigned.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Are we at closure on agenda item 1, strategic planning and goal area assignments?
I don't want to make you dizzy. I'm just going to go back up to the top just in case you see it again.
I want to attend to Jack's issue with the events committee that, task force.
Do you mind if I just go down the list one
Please.
time just to make sure? Goal
Okay.
area number 1, Jack and Brian. Goal area number 2, Kevin and David. Goal area number 3, Debbie and David. Goal area number 4, Vaughn and Kevin. Goal area number 5, Vaughn and Jack. And then goal area number 6, Jackson and Brian.
You feel covered enough?
Yeah. You want to just switch David and I on 3? So he's got, in case we need to lead. It's David and I.
You're both co-lead,
We're
I
both
think is what
co-lead.
you've decided,
Okay.
so it's not one of you.
Do you want to be on anything else? You okay? You okay? Okay.
Do we need to approve this formally?
Probably at your next meeting in April, you can formally approve it at that meeting, and then we can post it on the website.
Okay. So we'll start to build the agenda for the April meeting. This will be one item. Do we want to address the events task force? You were on that with whom?
One.
Okay. And you don't want to be on that now? Okay.
Didn't want to be on there.
Didn't want to be on it before. Now you definitely want to be on it. And that group met yesterday?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And so maybe we talk about that later. Do we want another person? Someone else want to be?
How does it belong in one of these 6 so that it doesn't get lost? I mean,
It's under,
Be under number
it's
5.
under number 5. for
so wouldn't it
events.
be Vaughn and, well, that's not
You can
Jack,
call it
okay.
community.
Let me ask you a question, though. This was a task force. What is the life of this task force?
The end game is to have a plan to present to the governing entities that have some authority over approval for events in town to try and encourage that the items that are in that plan are implemented to be able to run events.
I think by their very nature, task force should have a closing
Yep.
time.
Right.
If it's not going to be a task force, it should end at some point. When the task is completed, it should end. Otherwise, you set up a committee that's just a standing committee.
I think we talked yesterday about trying to have it done by June.
If you want to take me off number 6, I'll be on that task force with Vaughn. I
Okay.
don't have a problem with that.
Okay, we'll take you off.
And then Vaughn can bring me up to speed.
Not on the community well-being topic,
Well-
but on the task force.
On the legal and management issues, if you want to take me off of that and then find somebody else to go with Jackson on that, then I'll be with Vaughn on, because then I'll have 1 and then I'll be on this task force with Vaughn.
We can put 3 on here, right?
Yeah.
So Jack, you don't want to come off of this altogether. You just don't want to be on that task force anymore.
That's correct.
Anyone else want to be on legal and management with Jackson?
I wouldn't mind, but I don't know how good it
Fine,
looks
since
for
that's sitting in
3.
June, can you stay
Yeah.
on it? Just to give some continuity?
Stay on number 6.
Yeah.
Sure. Does anybody honestly believe it's ending in June?
June, July.
We can give an update later.
Oh,
about
yes, what
happened
year?
yesterday. I don't know that you're going to fix community problems by June, but we can have a plan, we think, by
Fine.
June.
Fine.
All right,
That's
so
always the key question, though, is how do you enforce it?
closure on strategic planning and goal areas. We're at closure, ready to move to the next agenda item?
So,
So what gets...
subject to some discussion or clarification of the roles of these leaders at some point that's formalized or more formal than we've got right now.
And to clarify, I think that management will be taking this direction from the one voice of the board, or once the one voice of the board's given and the 2 leaders are moving it forward, we'll be moving with those 2 leaders. So we can't come back to a meeting and say, well, management's doing something that they weren't supposed to be doing because we were working with those 2 leaders. We want to make sure that that's where we clarify how we operate.
Yeah, and that's really my point here, is I'm trying to keep you out of the wedge, okay? I think that when you are getting direction as management from 2 board members working in this situation, that may or may not reflect the wisdom or the wishes of the entire board. So somehow we've got, and I don't know the answer, I'm just saying we've got to somehow work out that chain of authority so that you don't get caught doing what you think you're supposed to do and then find out, whoops, that wasn't really what the board wanted me to do. Is that fair?
And I agree 100%. I think it keeps your meetings more productive, because if there's a system in place of how we're going about communicating the direction, the meetings are now held, board meetings are held to making decisions on moving the business of the association forward. It does cause a lot of extra time when we're debating back and forth who was supposed to be doing what.
So the question I would have would be, you have 2 people on each number there. Management should be able to contact either one of those people then in order to, for any information dealing with that? Is that the way you'd want it, or would you want one of the 2?
Yeah, so if we take just a little bit step out here and look at it from the big picture point of view, once you say this is our strategic plan, we turn around as the management team and we go to the leadership team and say, okay, make sure this is on your goals, make sure this is on your goals, let's talk about a project plan, let's look at deliverables, when are we going to have this stuff done? So we can take those plans and put them back into your board reports so that you can follow along with them. And we want to make sure that we're moving in the right direction on these goal areas, and we're not wasting our time and your time going somewhere we shouldn't be going.
If I may, historically, strategic planning has always been 2 co-leads or a lead and somebody else. But I understand exactly where you're coming from. And if each board member is going to be putting in the same kind of time, and somebody that was previously on the board can go ahead and share this with those who weren't, can we meet as a whole and discuss these items more often as a whole and invest that time that we're going in separate little committees, if you will? Because otherwise you're going to have the issue that you've already brought up, which is a unanimous board.
Well,
And
my
by dividing
thought-
this up, you're going to create quite the opposite.
My thought exactly is, I don't think these belong on the end of a board meeting, because if you were going to just discuss each one briefly, you could spend 15 minutes. If you take a couple of them, they're going to always take more than 15 minutes. To hope and pray you're going to put it on the end of the board meeting is what creates the issue of tiredness. I mean, we've sat here and said we'd love to have a 1-hour board meeting. I'll believe it when I see it. But if a board meeting takes an hour and a half, you don't give these justice. So I think the real answer to Jackson's question is, how do we, I think you can let people run with it from month to month and then update everybody at a workshop or however we want to structure it so that we talk about what's actually happened in these areas. And then if something belongs from the workshop onto a board, it should be brought on to that specific item.
And this really is, we've talked about this before, it's not really a long-range strategic plan. It's really your business plan for the next year. So what we've done is, over the last couple days that we've met, is we've talked about all the things that we think need to be accomplished in 2018, first part of 2019. So realistically, new items come in, the board should be able to say, this is so important that we want to reprioritize our strategic focus areas. And focus is the key word here, because in community association management, it's very easy to get schizophrenic and to start going in all different directions. It's the squirrel mentality sometimes. So if we can keep it focused to these are the items that we're doing, along with day-to-day operations of the association, anything new comes in, we say, how does this fit into the overall strategic plan? Each one of these items we should be able to take and say, when do we want to address this? Do we want to do it in a town hall, a workshop, or is it just something easy enough that management can go work on and give us regular updates on it? And then when it comes to making key decisions on these and things that you have to take action on and vote on, those take place at the board meetings. And it should be, ideally, it should be you've already talked about it enough, you've got enough engagement from the community, you've already done enough with it to be able to have the information you need to make those decisions.
So I think there's two parts. It's the tasks or the scope within each of these six, and it's also about communication. One of the things I'm proposing, which you'll see when we come to it later, is that in a couple of weeks, I would suggest the workshop after next, we talk about our communication, because we started with not having weekly management meetings. So to me, a question is, 2 weeks from now, how's that going? Not having weekly management meetings. We will start getting weekly updates or periodic updates from Steve that says things. So the question is that working for us as a board? I think this is some of the same things. If, for example, a small example, Debbie and I last year did the survey, and we would float the ideas of what the survey content would be by the board. Oh no, we don't want to do that topic, and how about this one? So we're going to do the background work, but it's a board decision. No, we're not going to do that topic, or why don't we deal with this topic, and what's the wording going to be before it goes out, before JR posts it. So we're doing the background work or the homework, that's how I view a lot of this. We're orchestrating it. Or that we decide, whoever's under number 6 or number 5, it would be nice if management would prepare in the next 2 months a specific plan on X or Y or Z.
If we look at them as specifics here, TCCA, TCF issues, that's probably going to require either a workshop or a town hall meeting where you're getting engagement, you're talking through the issues, maybe some executive legal sessions where you're meeting with your attorney on things from a legal standpoint. That's more of a big picture thing. If we go down to C, data security, it's not a problem for us to go out and get 3 or 4 bids for security alarms. And the CDD just did one and voted on it last night, so we can kind of piggyback off of maybe what they did. We can get the quotes for the key scan. That's stuff more that management kind of runs with. But I think if we went through each one of these, we can identify where it fits, how we want to address it, how we want to move it forward, and that way there is the one direction coming from the board.
So is this okay for now, knowing that we need to come back and talk about our communications? Okay. Yes. Let's move to are we okay?
I'm indifferent on this because of course, please take it as I'm new. Let's put it that way. And I see a lot of these issues, let's say these 6 items or issues or concerns or focuses that we have, that we are now taking a board of 7 and breaking down the concerns and making it up to a board of 2. And I know that sounds odd, and it's a different way to look at it, but I just want to make sure because, and Jack, as an example, you mentioned there's one, which focus is Jack on with the community events? Okay. So we look at this focus here, and Jack doesn't feel as though there's something that he could be a part of for the community events purpose, because there's a task force. So now we have somebody else that's going to jump into that portion. I feel as though if we have all the concerns brought up more commonly amongst all 7, we can actually address them and achieve them with 7 viewpoints to see the entire picture.
But my question would be, who does the research before you get to that point? Who would you want to?
Scattered.
How would we do that?
I just feel as though, like any other workshop, we all do our research before we come in.
Individually?
Individually, and we work as a group, we work as a board.
What if they were focus area champions, just to keep you on task, keep you reminded? Not necessarily nobody else works on it, but that's the person that kind of takes it upon themselves to say, let's make sure we keep this going. And
That's just my 2 cents. I'm not saying everyone's going to agree with it.
But does that focus area champion then have the ability to say to you, Steve, or to Susan, or anybody else in town hall, I want you to go do X. Because that's where, I mean, we're all talking around the elephant in the room, but the reality is that there were things that happened last year that were not perceived to be of the whole board, that were done by champions of particular goal aspects. That may have been correct, it may have been proper under those rules, it may have been completely acceptable, but I don't think that's the methodology that this board is trying to achieve in what we're doing. And so balancing the concern of effectiveness and efficiency with how do we get these things surfaced and talking about and resolving, I think it's ultimately going to end up with you being caught in a vice grip again of, well, that person told me to do it, but I don't know if the whole board wants me to.
Well, no, but we've got one major difference. We've already got a rule in place this year that you can't send an email or a text without copying the entire board. So using me and Jack as an example, we've got item number 1. If we're going to email on a topic, we're going to end up copying the whole board. I mean...
So you would then, let's say you directed Steve to do something at town hall, and the whole board would be copied on that direction, right? I just want to follow the process.
No, I mean, I don't think, I thought we had pretty much agreed Steve was not going to take oral direction from any of us, but we were going to go to a written protocol, and the written protocol required copying everybody here. I mean, I've been learning for the last week which emails I want to read and which ones I want to ignore, because I trust that Kevin is running with something and doing a great job. So the other side of that is we're going to get inundated with emails, but if you see something, you have the opportunity to look at it or not look at it. Steve, Susan, whomever is not taking direction orally. They're taking direction in writing. That's the cost of saying David's not meeting with them on a weekly basis. And so I think that addresses the concern, because you're going to see it, and if you want to raise your hand, you can raise your hand when you see an email.
Okay, with all this, I just would like to know then, on number 5, and my name's on there, we have meetings like we had yesterday. We had a couple hour so meeting. Who goes to the meetings? And then that end of, I mean, you have to have somebody designated to go to these. How do we do that? If we just not, everybody does everything on their own. How do we handle that?
I think you have an appointee to that.
Well, that's what we have up here, is what I'm saying. I mean,
so from the big picture of the focus area, you're kind of champion of that focus area, for that whole focus area. But then for the specific task force, the board would agree on who that appointee is to
We
that
have 2
task force.
appointees to that.
so we're still going to stay with this? Is that what you're, Kevin? I'm not clear on how you would change that.
I'm just trying to comprehend how we work as a group of 7 when there's a focus of 2. And it could be an ignorant statement, and I'm going to say that
Well,
right now.
how would you
I'm just trying
resolve
to
the committee
comprehend.
meeting like I went to yesterday? What would we do to change that to fit what you're proposing?
Primary example is I didn't even know that meeting happened yesterday until you sent an email saying that it was happening. So is that meeting open to the public? Is that meeting open? I'm sorry, one second. Is that meeting open to the board to go ahead and sit in? Are there minutes? Are there recordings? This ties into a resident question that we had by email. So that's what my concern is. I'm sorry.
This is an excellent discussion. I will tell you what the charter says. It doesn't say anything about what you're talking about, because you do have to decide. But what the charter says is that the management takes direction from the board. That's all of it. Not a committee, it says from the board. And then the charter says when it's expedient, or I'm not using the right words, required on short notice, management will discuss the issue with the president of the board until the board can waive.
And the contract also.
That's all it says.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we do, though. I mean, like the meeting yesterday, we come back and it gets presented to the board. We don't make any decisions there.
Well, I know you have another topic item today to talk about how we post task force meetings, but
Yes.
So this one, every other task force or committee has a resolution that was appointed and voted on at a meeting and was signed off on a resolution. this task force does not have a resolution, and it is something we should probably talk about because we want to make sure we're consistent across the board on how we're doing it. But we take minutes. I take minutes from that meeting yesterday. I'll be typing them up, and I'll email the entire board so that they can see what took place in the committee or the task force that was there yesterday.
So for now, can we have our co-leads or our champions do the background work and bring decisions to the board so we have group discussions as needed?
I think we have to.
There may be
Try to
nothing for this
come
month or the next work, there may be nothing. And maybe part of our workshops is look at the board areas and see what we need to.
You could always announce them, announce the meetings, and then at the meeting, you're there on these committees to gather information, and then bring it back to the board in some form at the workshop.
And then we can give consistent direction to the management.
Yes.
Want to make it easier for you.
Well, and I think you're making an adjustment and a change to ensuring that the rest of the board, you're consciously thinking as you're going about championing your areas, am I excluding the rest of the board? Is the rest of the board going to be involved? Am I going to talk about it at this meeting? It's something we should all consider, and as we're moving forward with these, say, how do I make sure that perception's not there, that something's being decided that the rest of the board wasn't involved in? And I agree with Jackson. I think it was innocent enough last year, but there was a perception at some point that it wasn't being shared, and that caused a problem. So how do you adjust, adapt, and fix that? And I think that this is a good start to that.
And so we're trying some new processes, some new protocols, and that's why I'm proposing in 3 weeks, the workshop 3 weeks from yesterday, that we stop and look at our own communication. How's it working for us? Or not? And we can make changes.
I'm satisfied with that, and I think Brian's point about the communication to everybody else is well taken.
Okay. So let's move on. If I may, let's adjust this from an hour down to, since we spent, so let's try 45 minutes maximum on the interlocal agreement. The interlocal agreement exists. It's a draft. I know that there was a request of the CDD board last night for a later version. I don't know that.
I have not received
Okay,
that yet.
so we're operating off of what we have. I would propose that we start our discussion at the very highest level and not in the weeds. The highest level is, do we want a relationship with the county with an exchange of funding them to us, and under what conditions, or
If I
not
might-
worry about wordsmithing, but it's
If
at
I might.
the high level. But go ahead.
Turn me away from the
Okay.
phone. At the highest level, it seems to me that there are so many questions about this community center that are fundamental questions like, do we want the center? If we want it, where do we want it? How much are we willing to spend for it? What does it include? What's the time frame for it? I think that there is a wealth of wisdom on this board, but not an exclusive call on the wisdom of this board. And therefore, what I've done is to prepare a motion at the chair's discretion as to when or how to proceed, that we would create a resolution for a task force, using that word, task force, that the task force be composed of 2 members appointed by each, two resident owners appointed by each member of this board, and a third appointment from the president of this board as a chair, that task force then be charged with holding public meetings over the next 2 to 3 months, that those meetings be recorded, that they be noticed, that they be made available, and that the task force would come back to this board with a written report as to their recommendations, not binding, but for informational purposes. That the point of this is to get community involvement and buy-in for what it is that occurs. The reason I've suggested that each member of the board be able to put 2 members on this task force is so that there's a wide range of representation from all parts of the community and from all points of view. I think that every member of this board should be able to sit as an ex officio member of that task force, which is to say we could attend those meetings, we could participate, and I would encourage us to do that, but that we would not be directly engaged in the writing of that proposal or recommendation. None of that is to eliminate any of the discussion that comes today about the interlocal agreement. But at the end of the day, talking about the interlocal before we know where we want a community center, if we want it, what we want to spend on it, is a little bit like those deals on the internet. Buy in the next 30 minutes or you lose it forever. It's fake scarcity, in my view. And I understand that the county wants us to move quickly, but the county just signed an agreement this afternoon for a $20 million ball field complex on West 192 that was off the table 6 months ago, came back on the table, includes all sorts of things. The county is clearly able to do a lot of things, and I don't think we should be pressured into making an immediate decision on the agreement without community input. So, my motion that I would like presented as you see fit would be that we actually create a task force that has a defined, you'll see a defined time to finish its work, and to give us recommendations.
Good. So this would be parallel to any discussion we would have now, next week, week after, whenever.
Yes. Yes, the answer is it would be parallel to what we're doing. It would be additional input for us. It would not preclude any of our decisions or preclude any of our discussions. It simply would be more information.
And that was my feeling was that we always needed to get the residents' opinions on this community center. Number one, I always felt the priority was, and I think everybody here knows what my priority was, does the community, I believe the community wants the center in a majority, but there's questions out there about how does it get funded. Are we going to take the county money, or are there alternative methods? And if there are alternative methods, how long would it take to build it? So I think the focus needs to be, and I agree with in concept with this, and I think that the first thing that has to be tackled, because there probably is some kind of timeline tied to that county money, how do we want to fund it? And I think the residents not only need to have input as far as what it's going to be used for, but if the county pays, if they decide they want the county to pay for it, what are the provisions that the county wants in that agreement? Specifically, what are the provisions? And then if not, do we want to wait 2 years, 3 years, or whatever it happens to be if we want to fund it ourselves? So I think that needs to be the priority, because if we have a time frame on that money being accepted or rejected, I think we got to find out first, do the residents want the county involved in it, or do we want to do it ourselves?
And if I could just add to that, well, I just spoke with Dave Tomac today, who's been my representative from the county. He was at the CDD meeting that we just had. And again, he's reiterating there is no pressure from the county that you have to take the money. They're not saying take it now or we're taking it back. I did tell him that it could be as late as June or July before we know what is going to take place if this task force comes on board. And he said that's not a problem. Now, this was all verbal. Nothing has ever been given to us in writing that says you have to use this money by this date or we're out. So this is the latest information that I just received from him today.
One thing I see in this is the task force of 15. I know we've done it before, but we've normally done 7 or 8. Jack, do you remember?
7.
7?
Yes.
15, that's a tough number for decision purposes quickly.
Yeah, can I address that? The reason I suggested, and I defer to the wisdom of the board and your experience, is that by having 15 at any given meeting, we'll have 7 or 8 there, and that the board would have the opportunity, if these are recorded, for other members to participate and watch the recordings, but that the widest possible buy-in into the input gives us the widest base to make our decision, and that each board member having the ability to appoint 2 members means that we're going to get a broad distribution of people from the community engaged.
I disagree. I think you're still going to get a broad distribution, but the nature of the 7 of us are totally different in our thoughts. So I think 7 is fine. I think getting 15 people, we don't even have 15 people in the audience. We don't even have 15 people, including us. or maybe we do. It's just a hard thing to get that many people together. And then the question becomes, do we need a majority of 15 in order to do any?
We would
conduct any
need a
business?
quorum of the 15.
So you're going to establish a quorum system.
Would be,
Would you want a quorum?
if they're going to vote for the final recommendations to be made to the
That meeting
board,
would
they would
require
need a
it.
quorum.
Sure. That final meeting would certainly require it. Again, if the board's consensus is, look, 7 people would be enough, okay. It's okay with me. I just want to make sure that we've got a task force that's broad enough and can get its work done. And if the wisdom of those of you who've been around is, nope, 15 is too many, then
How many were on the education task force?
7.
Oh, that was 7, okay.
Yeah.
How do you determine
Okay.
who's going to be chosen? If each person, you may pick someone that has 2 people that have the same opinion about the center, how are you going to get a diversity, ensure that you have a diversity of opinions, or being people that are neutral on the position until they actually gather the information? How do we ensure that?
And I think you try to find leaders that will listen to the community and make a decision. But that's what I did in the past. I mean, we didn't know what we wanted to do with the educational task force, but we looked for leadership in it.
Because you may have people that are totally in favor of accepting the money from the county, no matter what they hear, and then you may have people on the other end of it. So, I mean,
I think the
how do we
board-
ensure we don't get them like 10 people out of 15 that absolutely are against the county money or for the county money?
Yeah.
Jay?
I think this is a board issue to make that determination. First off, we got to realize, can we get an interlocal agreement that makes sense to the community and us? If you can't do that, then there's no sense in dealing with the community center right at all, because you won't have the money for at least 3 years before you can build it. So, to me, that's the first and foremost thing: is an agreement doable or not? Okay, if the board can't decide on that, then we're not doing our jobs.
I think the county needs to come out right now and say what public use and access means, exactly how much office space they want and what they want, and then go from there.
So
Because otherwise,
Well,
how do you go on from
can I
there?
ask Steve to address the usage that the county wants?
But it's not clear to me. I read it, but it didn't seem very clear.
If it's a matter of language, I think that you always have the opportunity to say, we think it should read this way as opposed to this way. But what they've talked about needing and what is reflected in there, depending on how you read it and what you think it says, but they want an office space for an extension service officer, agent, to be able to have a presence here in the celebration community. And extension services, if you're not familiar with it, it's a free service. It's not free, you're paying your county taxes for it, but it's a service that will do soil sample testing for you. They have classes on health, home economics, cooking, diets, all kinds of stuff. They have turf specialists. They have all kinds of free services that are available. So it doesn't seem like that would be a caution to have that office there. And they said that the space size would be about half the size of our 101 little conference room over there. So it's not a huge space size that they're asking for. The other request that they ask is if there's an emergency or if a county manager or commissioner needs to do a town hall meeting, that we are able to make space available for them to do that. And then the third request is to be able to have, to not just lock out non-celebration residents, meaning we could still run a basketball league and we could say all celebration residents pay $50 for the league and all non-residents pay $60 for the league. You have the ability to do that. And then you have the ability to prioritize how you book out your meeting space. So if your meeting space is already taken through lifelong learning and thriving in place and art classes and everything else that you're going to program in there, there just won't be any room available for a group to come in. Now, we want to be careful about saying this type of group can't use it or that type of group can't use it, because there could be discrimination, and we want to avoid that. But I think the key here is, what does the wording look like that makes the board comfortable with what that public purpose is? That's the way that they've explained it to us, but how do we get it documented in that contract to where you're comfortable
Get it in
with that?
writing. And number 1 on that list, if you look at that priority list we just got on that last document, county's on number 1.
Well, government.
County government, but what does that mean? It's not defined.
Yeah,
I
they
think
want
that's
to be
the
able to
concern.
hold if they want to do a FEMA meeting. That's what they're talking about with that.
I think
Brian,
we need to know
But,
that.
I mean, I wrote 2 whole pages of comments on the review. To me, to say those one or two items of the issue is just pretty misleading. I pretty much went page by page and saw things that I thought I could drive a truck through, and I'm not an attorney, but I've been in the reinsurance business my whole entire life. So, I mean, to me, we need the right small group of the right players to get together and have a very detailed conversation, because I agree with what Jack said. Let's figure out if we can do the interlocal. If we can do the interlocal, we need a task force in a hurry. If we can't do the interlocal, we got 3 years. It's really...
But going back to Jackson's point, I don't know that we have a timeline with the interlocal. They've talked generally, but just if we don't make a decision till December, it sounds like based on this facility down the way, this money or maybe more money can be available later. I mean, it's not like it's going to disappear.
They want you to be able to take your time to make a well-educated decision on what you want to do. They do not want to be perceived as they're just jamming this money down your throat or dangling it and saying we're going to take off with it.
And then it's going to disappear on June 30th or August 1st. So let me go back to your resolution, proposed resolution. I see two things just under item 4 that I think we've talked about. One is a timeline that the proposed task force would address, the timeline for the building. The timeline. I mean, like, okay, we decided that we're going to wait until 2021 because we'll have the reserves built up, or whatever. So what's the proposed timeline? But the other thing goes, it's part of item C where you wrote, what should the proper role of the county be in usage of the facility, if any? So I have some slightly different wording. It's like, what are the conditions under which the county money may be accepted? So what?
That'd be fine.
But it's something that says, well, it's what are the conditions that the county money would be accepted? So translate that into 4 separate initiatives. One is the resident task force. Second is, and Debbie and I will present this next week, the results from our February survey that dealt with community center. Right. So that's just a preliminary scratching of the surface. It's not definitive. It's here's what their thinking was, here's what their comments say as of February, with no further information. Third is, Steve just talked about what the county has said verbally in terms of public use, what that might translate to. I would think a directive to management would be to write that up. Write that up so that the task force and we understand what that is.
Well, it's going to need to be legal because the legal has not even reviewed this interlocal agreement. It's only been comments back from the past board and then...
But if these are comments that you're hearing of what it means, started in layperson's language, right, or approaching legal, so that a task force could help to dissect it and say, well, that's not good enough, or how about this? And then the fourth is, what does that actual agreement look like? So there's 4 parallel things that I think can be happening. Survey results, task force, looking at the interlocal agreement, and then looking at what public uses. They feed into each other.
And to tie, I'm sorry, just to tie into one of your items that you mentioned there, I think that under what conditions would you take county money is an important question too, because for the 4 years that I've been here, I've heard from residents that the county doesn't do anything in Celebration or this area to provide parks and recreation space. Therefore, you all subsidize it yourselves with your dollars. So whatever that final determination of what public use is, that's going to be the condition on any county dollars you take, whether that subsidizes your athletic fields or it pays for a new building or it goes into the Stetson building. It doesn't matter what it is. That's going to be the deal taking county dollars moving forward. So if you decide that you're not going to use county dollars because of that public purpose, then county dollars for parks and Celebration are probably off the table moving forward.
But we...
Back to Brian and Jack's point, I mean, I agree the task force and the community center, but we're looking at this interlocal agreement, which is strictly legal, and I hate to throw that onto a task force before we make the decision whether we want it or not.
See,
I don't know which needs to come first.
I'm 100% there. I think until we define the interlocal, we're setting a task force up only to fail and frustration, which because it'll be hard enough for the 7 of us to figure out what the interlocal agreement is. And then here are the rules. Do we want the money? Yes or no? And then on to this here, I think you've got to charge the task force with a second thing, which is, okay, then how are we going to use the 851 building? If we're going to have a community center in the 851, maybe you're going to keep Lifelong in here forever because it's the best location for that type of a program. So they've almost got to think about the two things
That's a good point.
against each other. But until we know what the interlocal rules are, I don't know how you charge anybody with figuring out how to move forward.
But isn't the guts of interlocal what that public purpose, I mean, what that negotiation is with the county? Isn't that the guts?
I think that these concerns are well-founded. I'm not suggesting that this task force be asked to figure out the interlocal. What I'm asking for is that the task force consider the meta question of where do we want a community center? When do we want it? What should it include? What are the options, like the 851 building, or Stetson, or something else we haven't even thought of? Then I think it's up to us as a board to do the deep work with that input to say, can we create an agreement with the county, an interlocal, that will get us there? And if this suggests that I think that the task force should do the interlocal review, that's my error in drafting. That is not my
I
intention
don't see
at all.
that I see that as parallel.
All right, I'm going to go back to, look, you have a choice. Either you take the county money and then you build it as a community center, or we could delay. And how many years will it take for us to accumulate $3.5 million?
It'll take 3 years or so.
Okay, so there's no rush. The first thing we have to do is decide if the interlocal is appropriate. If it's not, then we just sit there and accumulate money, and you can wait 2 years before you do your task force.
Because you've got 1 year now, if you waited this year, and say if we took the county money in December, you'd have a buildup of money for 1 year. So you're thinking of, what, maybe another 2 years after that?
I'd say 3 years is what you're going to need, because
Okay.
you're talking, I don't know, probably $3.5 million, $4 million by the time you
about
put all the
about
things
$1
you
million.
want in that thing.
But that's something the community, I think, needs to know. How long would it take us to
But
build
we
our
will-
funds up to buy it?
So next meeting, I assume it's on your agenda, we said we would go through a whole financial presentation, which I've been working on.
Yes.
So at the next meeting, next week, we'll talk about, all right, what does the real financials look like? What does the cash look like? What's in reserves? We're following up. I've been working with Susan on what are the rules around these reserves and stuff like that. We've had things we're clarifying. So, I mean, we're ready to talk about that next week. But Jack is correct. We're not going to have money to start next Wednesday, because we've still got to finalize the athletic fields even.
David.
Please.
But does any of this eliminate the need for a task force to get community input, to tell us what the community is thinking, to give us direction? They're not making the decision. They're simply giving us the input. I, for one, as a single board member, I am terribly uncomfortable with making a decision about the interlocal without hearing more from the community. During the campaign, I think it was the number one thing I heard from people that people wanted to talk about, that they were concerned about. To Debbie's question about how do we, and Vaughn's question about how do we make sure that we're not overloading this committee, the reason I suggested 2 people was that in my own mind, as I thought about if I were appointing 2 people to this task force, I would actually look for someone who is an advocate on either end of this question so that we get a diversity of opinions onto the task force. I think if the task force invites the community to speak to them, creates the opportunity for that dialogue, creates the opportunity for the discussion, then we are the beneficiaries of having a lot more input, a lot more information. And then if Jack's position is correct, that we need to move on this interlocal, and that's what the focus is, then I think we can do it with a whole lot more confidence that we are doing the wishes of what the community wants. I just don't think we have enough information in front of us to make that decision today.
So the county survey that you two did and sent out, that covered what, if we wanted a community center, and if we did, what we
Not if
would
you
like to
want-
see in it?
Not if you wanted one. We had that on our prior survey.
Right, I remember the one.
But from February, it's like, which of the, or how important would it be for each of the following elements to be included? You know, from indoor basketball courts to tutoring rooms, to computer labs, to
Okay.
meeting rooms.
What was the response? How many responses did
Same
you get on
as,
that?
same as prior, like 900 people.
So if we sent out another survey and said, okay, now we know
Right,
those answers. Now the next question is,
right,
this is what the county wants to do.
right.
This is the money they're going to give us. This is what the county's wants to have access to. Do you want that, or do you want no county and
Right.
paying for it ourselves? Would that
Pay
be
for
something,
ourselves.
could that be done in the survey
Sure.
and then answer
Pay
this?
for ourselves, do a special assessment. I know there's different rules.
Or
on
whatever-
that.
whatever Brian
Wait 3
presents
years-
next
wait
week.
3 years.
Yeah.
Here's some options.
Could that be done with a survey, do you think?
Or,
You get a
or
set.
we
or a
get a
town hall
wider-
meeting. as
Or
you-
we could,
no,
yeah,
both.
town hall
Or
meeting.
both.
Right.
Or both.
Can I just add just a couple pieces of information to help you make this decision? I heard maybe the task force would have a second function of deciding who uses what room. I would suggest that you utilize your recreation committee for that, because you have a recreation program plan that guides you in that direction, and they would be able to help you get the right programming in the right places during the right times. So I think that that's okay for us moving forward. We'll be able to handle that, along with the athletic fields and all the other new facilities. The second part to this, though, is if you're going to do a stakeholder meeting and surveys for use of facility, the county is going to pay for that. If you can wait for that, I think your biggest decision now is, do you want to take the money or not take the money? And how you come about that decision is what you're talking about now. But if you decide you want to take the money, part of the money that they're giving you initially up front will allow for a design engineer firm to come and do your charrette meetings, do a survey for you, do your stakeholder meetings, and determine what you want the inside of the building to look at. So it's an option that you have available to you. But your biggest question right now is, do you even want that money or not?
Well, that's the thing, I think we need to wait
The
until,
horse thing. I mean,
yeah.
seems to me that this task force could operate without that funding, have time limited, you have 3 months, give us input, and then we make a decision on interlocal.
I think we need to hear first from Brian and in his conjunction with Town Hall and Susan to be able to tell the residents, this is how much money we'll have in order to pay for it in this length of time. Because we can't go to the residents and say, well, you want to pay for it. They want to know, well, how long is it going to take?
Yeah.
So I think we need to know that
Yeah.
before we even go.
The trade-offs, yeah, Gary.
Can you come on mic since we're on camera? I'm sorry. Just so everyone can hear you at home. The 3 people watching.
Gary Hutsmith at Spring Lake. There's nothing wrong with getting an updated community input, sure. But I do want you, if you're not aware, I invite your attention to the 2015 Facilities Master Plan, which has the community task force results that were completed in 2015, and they advocated a community center for various reasons, and there are several pages of funding which explained how the community can fund that community center. It was laid out from 2015 all the way through 2023 or 24. It's all laid out in there. Now, the funding has changed. We actually have more money coming in than we used to, but the baseline is still valid. I think you should use that as a baseline if you're going to get community input beyond that. Please read that.
I'm just looking, Rachel, you can help. Something new in your hands, this is a slight sidebar, but directly to Gary's point. Is that not in our brand new?
Not the facilities. It's got the recreation program plan, specific pages from the recreation program plan. But the facilities master plan is online under Parks and Recreation, and it is in your Dropbox of the overall documents that you wanted access to.
But that overall master plan is not here?
Not the facilities master plan. That was, I think you asked specifically for certain pages from the recreation
But there
program.
was also one at a higher level. I think I wanted the other one too, but we
We can
can
get it,
always
we
update
can add it in
that.
there.
Yeah, because that's the larger master plan.
For
the
how,
team.
for how you're going to prioritize the building of your facilities.
Yeah, that's something I think should be in here.
And I don't think it addresses the issues of where and, it addresses we want a building, but it doesn't address the.
It does to a certain extent, but I think there's multiple options though, because I think there was a drawing of one being over on the grass over here,
yeah.
which isn't even our property. And then there was something maybe here at this building. At the time though, Stetson was never even a consideration. Nobody knew it was going to be up for sale.
It's a very useful document. I'd like to see the task force take that document, share it, put it out in the community, and say, now, given our current circumstance, as we take the core of what we had, what we now know, what's now on the table to us, what do we provide? I want to be clear that nothing about this proposal for a task force in any way hamstrings or limits what this board can do. It's literally just an attempt to get additional information while we're doing all of the other inquiry that we need to do as board members, financially, legally, in the details of the interlocal. And I hope we don't lose sight of that. It's easy to get caught up in the weeds here, talking about what the interlocal should say, because there's a lot wrong with it, as many of us have already identified. But it's a separate issue than having community input, and that's what I'm hoping that the board can reach a consensus on today, is that we need community input that builds on what we did in 2015 and takes us to where we are today.
I think these interlocal agreements, you got to be careful, because the broader they are, the more beneficial they are to the party who writes them. So we need. Yeah.
So can we move, so can we talk about this resolution?
Please.
About setting up a task force. Eileen?
Yeah, let me say something.
To the microphone, please.
Yes. Basically, basically, I just really want to second what Gary was saying. And I'm also going to say that I followed this. I've read all the documents. I saw the workshops and whatever. And yes, there has always been an interest in having a community center. It's been going on for a long time. It was interesting, I think, that when the last board voted on the fields, there were a number of people on social media who said, this has been worked on for 10 years. And I think that's true. And I think that whether we can do this in 2 years or we can do it in 5 or 6 years, this is not too early to start talking about it.
Good, thank you. What do we think about moving forward with the task force? Time limited task force. And if we were to have a sense here, what does it take to formally constitute it? Meaning to have a resolution. Can a resolution occur before the April meeting? And if so, under what circumstances should we want to move forward?
Can I address that question
Please.
first? I think you could vote today to approve this resolution, well, a resolution, and give us some structure for how to do it. But there's a couple logistical things. Susan and I, management, cannot write a resolution. It would be considered an interpretation of law. So the board can write a resolution, or you can send it to Tom Slayton and have him review it and okay it and write it.
Or both,
that's strictly your prerogative. Yeah, you could do both.
I mean,
I think my resolution is sufficient at this stage.
Again, it's okay. If the
Again,
board
I'm not
wants to do
pretending
it.
to be a lawyer here,
Right.
but my resolution is, I think, sufficient for our purposes to advance it if the board chooses to vote and accept it.
That's my point. I want to make sure you understand that you can write the resolutions yourself. And what Jackson has wrote, if you approve it as a board, you could adopt that resolution. Or you could vote on it over email and sign a written consent ballot. But it was an agenda item that you noticed today, and you could vote on it today. Because if you wait until April, it's the end of April, and you won't get it started until middle of May, and now June probably isn't realistic at that point.
We've got a workshop next week. I fundamentally have a problem with a resolution on any topic being brought to a board meeting, having not even read the thing thoroughly and voting to approve it. That's just as a matter of principle.
So
I'd like
Susan-
to at least read the darn thing.
I'm sorry, I mean, Susan made a great suggestion. You could take the next week to review it and vote on it next Wednesday, because you have another meeting next Wednesday.
Because I know there are questions that Dave had on some of the wording already, so
Yeah,
we'd have to go
just
through
two-
item by item.
Just two
to get
suggestions, so maybe we
a lot of work.
share this by email. You may have already shared it by email.
I have shared it by
Yes.
email, and I fully agree with that approach. I'd like to see it addressed in the next workshop if we can reach a consensus, and that would give all the board members an opportunity to review it and make their suggestions and their potential modifications.
I'm still struggling with the task force getting together and not knowing what the interlocal means and whether it's really going to I could just see, I mean, I know, I've had people tell me if there's a task force is formed, they want to be on the task force. So we're going to get brave volunteers. I'm not worried about that at all. I'm worried about the brave volunteers coming forth and saying, okay, and I want to understand the rules of the interlocal because this is my opinion. And we're going to sit here and say, but we don't know. And I think my fear, I love the idea of a task force, so I'll just say that up front. But my fear is without a group of us working with the right parties to say this is the interlocal rules, that this thing will get ground down. That is my concern.
I'd say we have two different issues going on right now. We have the task force that you're proposing, I think, is excellent. I think that maybe a phase 2, and phase 1 and phase 2 definitely intertwine. But we need to have way too much work done on this interlocal, and for us to pass that buff to somebody else, I don't know. I just get nervous on that. I would like to hear what the residents would like, and I want that perspective. And the only perspective that I think we could hear right now is the usage of outside residents. That's the only perspective that would be relevant to phase 1. And we need to hear if we could eliminate that priority.
Use of outside.
Just the Osceola County residents, if you're not a Celebration resident.
A public
coming
purpose.
In, a public purpose. I have a concern because my thing is we own this land and we're telling the county, hey, yeah, here's the land. You're going to go ahead and give us some money. We're going to pay for the maintenance of it. But you're going to get to use it just as much as we do, if not ahead of us on certain priorities. What's different from the county putting the community center across from 192? Have them purchase their own land, build the money, put the money into it, and then all residents get to use it, including ours, without us paying for the maintenance. I know that sounds interesting, but I just want to look at the whole picture.
Yeah, this goes back to the interlocal agreement. Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, the county basically said they would accept our recreation program plan, which had the prioritization of who gets to use things in which order. I know you brought some stuff up that you had questioned about, but the only reason, the only thing.
That's not what it says.
They
have.
Do they rewrite
It
settlements?
is all about the wording. So if you all want the wording to be more specific to what you're talking about, you got to counteroffer with them.
Can
we
we-
have not counteroffered other than some initial comments that we've made to them.
Okay, so for purposes of this group, can we designate a small group of people to write our counter? The whole board will review it, but we don't need 7 authors, so we'll go nuts. But then let's, as I'm hearing here, then let's go back and say this is our proposal. And they may say this is nuts, or they may say, well, we want to change these 3 things, and we may find out we're a long ways down the road.
Yeah, if they say no to your counter, then that at least you have some kind of line in the sand that you're saying, here's what we're willing to accept or not accept. And I think to answer your question, Kevin, is you're talking about having a community center in Celebration that you're getting someone to give you the dollars for, and here's the stipulations that come along with it. That's the biggest difference. Then, because 192, whether it's across the street or where the new facility is going to be down by Margaritaville, that's an inconvenience for residents to drive that far. So I think that that's probably the big question that you're answering is, do we want it now with someone else's dollars and we don't have to pay for it, or do we want to wait 3 or 4 years and use our own dollars?
If we can get a good interlocal in their dollars, that's a great answer. Let me help you.
So Steve,
Probably
didn't
makes a lot of sense.
CBD lawyer last night say that they would have to do the agreement with the county, and then they would come back and do an agreement between CBD and CROA?
So the CDD attorneys called me on Tuesday and said that they had been working on an agreement also through their comments. And I asked them for a copy of that, and they said, to get a copy, you're going to need to come and ask the CDD because they instructed them to stop working on it completely. So I went last night and I asked them, and they agreed to send that to us. So as soon as I get that, I will release that to the entire board for you to look at. And then I think that adds that layer of how does that tie into what has already been working? Does it make more sense to do it the way the CDD is talking about doing it? Is there a group of you that rewrites it together and interacts? But the interlocal agreement is just that. It's 3 entities working together to come up with the best wording and documentation to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish.
I don't know if we need to rewrite the whole thing. I think we just need an answer
Is that
on that
public-
one provision
the
on
public
public use and
use?
access. We need to find out, what do you really want? What's the bottom line?
I think we should rewrite the thing addressing the points that we've all raised and get it out there as a floater. I think if we just take the one item, it still leaves the 480-day issue that I raised, for example. I didn't think that was good at all. There's other things in there. I mean, we got the talent here. Let's come back and say, here's our rebuttal.
And who knows where they came up with 480 days? It might have been just something they put on the air. It might have been standard, and then they can
be.
push it back further if you need to. But
Or
no
do
one's
it,
asked them.
or just address the one for now and see if that's acceptable to them. Just
Yeah,
the
public
one,
use and
just the
access.
public purpose one.
Has apart from the CDD attorneys, has Tom Slayton looked at this whatsoever?
He has not provided any feedback at all for
Should
this.
I mean, the seven of us, we have attorney backgrounds, but he's been involved in the community, and he knows when it comes to.
But
Most tell them what you want, though. First, I would say here's exactly what we're
But most
looking
people
for.
who've looked at this say it is just a skeleton contract. I think Tom Slayton would get very expensive very fast because it's almost like somebody just said, here's a holder, here's a placeholder. That's why I think we got to do something to move the dime.
If the public purpose is a deal breaker, then it doesn't matter about the rest of it.
Exactly.
If I could add to Brian's statements, right now, the county has been writing this with their attorney that they pay on as an employee. And we've just added a few comments, but if you were to kick it back to them and say, it needs to say this, 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 and this, or to the CDD attorney, it needs to say these things. And then, once it says what you think it says, then Tom will go over and say, yep, everything's covered the way you want it to be covered.
We're going to need to reach we got a couple comments. We've got to reach closure if we're going to finish on time. Mike, quickly.
I'd be disappointed if I didn't get up. Just a comment. What you're talking about is a negotiation, and I think you need to decide what your A position is and what's negotiable and what's non-negotiable. And then you'll have a B position too that may be acceptable to you, but you're not going to disclose that, obviously. I think right now at the stage of them being the author, to Vaughn's point, and drafting it, I think that's an issue. And you're just responding to them and the confusion and the lack of focus you've got on it. I think that's a problem. I think what you should do, which is done in a lot of contracts, is put together a term sheet. And what are the 10 terms or what are the 10 items that are absolutely non-negotiable to you and what you need to have. So develop your 10 items or your whatever number it is, your terms for the contract itself, and then turn that over to the lawyers. Well, first share that with them and see if they're acceptable to that, and then turn that over to the lawyers and start drafting that in. But I think you got to get a real clear line of sight on what your terms are that are going to go into this contract.
So just on that point, that's a small group creating those terms or that public purpose?
How do we know the terms, though, without knowing what the residents want?
Right, exactly, but I think we can have some parallel things.
I don't understand.
Well, we were talking about the survey before where they got certain information. Now we want to know what would be acceptable to the residents as far as public use to the thing. But if we don't know what their needs are, how can we write them up ourselves and present them to the county?
To move this forward, what if we had a couple of you work on a paragraph or two of whatever those terms, those key points on public purpose, and then next week we decide on the resolution?
Well, and can I also offer, I don't think you're starting from scratch. You have a prioritization listing that is in the recreation program plan, and I think the county's already agreed to that, except for they have moved up where the rest of the county residents are. So the question is, when you give them back the terms, where does that fit? And this, again, it is a negotiation, and it's determining how much strength are you negotiating from. I mean, how important is it to you to have the community center and to take those county dollars? Or do you have enough strength to where you say, hey, we can just wait for 4 years. We don't have to bend on any of this stuff. And I think that's a key decision here.
But there's some conditions under which it sounds like this board would not want to move with county dollars. I mean, what you were outlining.
I don't think
I'd like to
anybody
just
wants to move
understand
forward if the county's going to.
If it's totally open.
I don't think anybody's going to want to move
Right.
forward if the county's controlling this whole thing. We want an agreement that slants it totally in our favor.
Right.
Okay, well, so we need to push the county, see how far they'll go.
That's right.
Okay?
And we
And I'm
know
sure
we can't wall it. We know we can't wall it off. We
But
know that.
But at the end of the day, we either get an interlocal right now or we've got time. I mean,
have time.
that is just clear as a bell when we do the presentation next week. I mean, so,
We have time.
you know, I still firmly believe the interlocal, and if we wait, we're not going to move off the dime ever if we don't move off the dime. That's the problem, and we're sitting here waiting on surveys is wonderful, but it's not going to move us off the dime. That's my problem.
Well, and your time actually puts you right in line with what the 2015 Facilities Master Plan said for building a building, around 20, 22, 23, 24.
So wrapping this discussion up, where are we? Next week, we will
We'll get the financials from
do
Brian on the
financials.
funds.
We'll also have a week to look at this, so we can share comments by email.
Fine.
On the resolution?
I mean, Brian, you want to do like a small group, is that what you're saying, just to?
For the financials?
No.
That's for next week.
Agreement.
I mean, I personally believe since we're meeting, I think it's next Thursday, right? Wednesday.
We're meeting
I think
on
on Wednesday, we start with the financials. I think we can come back to this, but I think we should assign a small group next Wednesday to go through the interlocal agreement and come back. It won't be perfectly legal written, but here are the important items to us. I mean, like I said, I've done 2 pages. Vaughn's written some comments. Others have written some comments. So we've got a lot of things that does exactly what Mike just said. And let's go back to them and say, these are the critical points. And they may say this is nuts, or they may say, okay, we need your attorney talking to our attorney with some representatives to be the lead.
So the rework for next week or from next week?
Do you want to? Since we're on it?
Who's on the strategic plan for the interlocal?
Jack and
You want to have something for next week or start it next week?
You can have the money ready next week? I mean, as far
The
as...
money will be
the-
written.
Okay.
The money part of the presentation will be
Presentation
next
will be ready.
week. I mean, I've already,
Okay, not for next week. Then let's just resolve not for next week on the interlocal.
yeah, I mean, I'm finishing up some other stuff on the money stuff and everything.
How about if we do a review of this rewrite of the community user groups usage priority table?
Do that for next week
Let's just review that and reorganize it if we want, come in with it.
in some other language.
And what else we...
Okay.
Eileen, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, which is sort of a quick word about just my impression from where this discussion is going. As somebody pointed out, Celebration is an amazing community, and we have people who have done all kinds of things, and perhaps something to be considered is maybe a smaller task force, because I'm not sure you could get, basically looking for people who have had some experience working with a government entity, building this kind of entity. For example, in Artisan Park, we have a board member who is always talking about how they managed to put together a library for the community in Illinois. And I think we've got quite a few people who have some experience who may, in the beginning, they would just be working on the interlocal to just sort of say, these are some of the things you should always watch out for, or, this is the trouble we had. I think in a community like ours, this would be possible, and I offer that as a sort of compromise.
Okay. Let's close this down. We have 55 minutes. We have a lot to cover.
And David, can I just ask is there going to be a small group of you all meeting to talk about the items you'd like to look at in the interlocal agreement? Because I'd like to be part of that conversation also.
Not before next week, right? Not before Wednesday?
Not before Wednesday, or if it's ready by Wednesday, yes. If it's not,
If what's ready.
some of that prioritization, isn't that what you were talking
Well, I
about?
thought we were going to work on that individually, then bring it to the next meeting. on
Oh,
Wednesday.
okay. Instead of doing it as a small group,
So
just
we
everyone
have
work on
a
it. Okay.
growing agenda, big agenda for Wednesday.
well, basically, if you do the financials and you do the interlocal conversation, that's going to be your agenda for next week. It'll take that long.
So,
Well, we had on there to talk about the restrooms and
and the athletic fields.
Yeah.
Right. But this drives, I think, that decision too. This has a,
And I'm going to put some other things on the agenda, so we'll come back to that.
well, can I just offer this then? If you have any questions about how that list was developed based on the task force meetings or the recreation committee, call me, email me, whatever
Okay.
you need, and I can help you with that.
Moving on, let's prioritize our time and limit it. We have 50 minutes left. We wanted a discussion on ARC and covenants and appeals. We also have some administrative and management items. Code of conduct, town hall meetings, county commissioner, resident requests, and subcommittee. We also need to look at our agendas for the next workshop and the workshop after that. So what do you want, what's the pleasure of the board? What's urgent today?
Well, on the ARC covenants and appeals, I had sent an email to Susan and Steve just saying it'd be nice if Tony could give us a presentation. I mean, basically, we've got April 10th, I think it is, maybe 8th, 9th, whatever that date is. Before that date, we need a presentation on what's going to happen there and some background. So 1 hour of education, 2 or 3 people said they wanted to be there. I think that's what we need there.
It's really an update.
Would it be possible to just schedule that as we come in and,
Right.
covenants for dummies? Could we
That's
do
what
that?
I was hoping we could do right now, is just put it in Tony's court to coordinate it. I know you wanted to be part, Jackson and myself. I don't know if Vaughn or anybody else wants to be part. And she can send an email to 3 or 4 of us and set up a meeting.
Could we make that public? Would there be anything that you discuss at that?
Pardon? If there's 4, it's got to be public.
Well, of course that, but I'm just saying that I feel this information would be beneficial to the entire community. So if we're going to come in and we're going to schedule some time with Tony, perhaps it could be at a time that the entire community can come in. If they please, if they'd like to learn about ARC covenants and appeals, everybody can sit in.
I don't know if they would.
Whether they would or wouldn't, the option would be there.
There may be people in the community who want to know what's going on.
You
So-
don't really notice that as a front flash.
Is there a 10-minute version you have, or do you have an hour version? An hour version won't work today. You have what?
I can do an hour version.
No, I'm asking if you have a 10-minute.
Not today, not today, not
Hour version
today.
does not compute. This is a time warp.
Can you do a 10-minute version?
Do you have a 10-minute version?
Well, you have all of the information in your binders, just so you know, written down step by step. But I think we're fine.
Okay, so can we take just 10 minutes and talk about this? So the quick introduction to your binders, brand new for all of us today.
Yes.
Before this board was constituted, before you 4 were elected, I, as the only new board member last year, was on a learning curve for the year. And I thought, boy, it would have been nice if I had this and that. So before you all came to office, I started brainstorming what would I like to see. And then when we got constituted, I started to put pen to paper. Rachel, Steve, and Susan put together a draft that I had in front of me last week. I went through it, met again with them on Monday. So this is the final version that I have proposed to them, and they suggested some of this and that. There will be things that you want more permanently, and we can insert those. All of this, all or most of this, correct me if I'm wrong, Rachel, is on Dropbox.
It hasn't been put there yet. It's ready to go off.
So there's a lot of other things on Dropbox, but this is, I wanted a print version for you of some of the things that frankly aren't going to change between this year and next year and the year after. There'll be a few updates, but it's our charter is our charter. Our bylaws are our bylaws. There's a listing in here. You can go through this on your own, and we can do a walkthrough. But that's just by way of introduction, is that there was some write-up on covenants from several different sources, covenants appeals. And you know where it is in here?
Yes, section 4.
Oh, section. Wow. Okay, so it's in section 4.
And I
So-
believe page 32 is what Rachel told me
Called
earlier.
Committees and Procedures. And if you don't like the structure of things, one person is responsible, and he is talking. So this is my proposal, and I hope it's helpful, and if it wasn't, then you can elect someone else in this role.
So maybe we just read this, and then if we need you for 10 minutes, we can do it.
I think you would start on page 21 and work your way back from there, because it's got covenants and finding and ARC and everything else in it.
So I think the intent of this is how it is done. This is our understanding, and if And also sitting in some covenants meetings over the last year, and then architectural review committee meetings, I would think, oh, there was I just heard a lesson. I just heard that's why they decided what they decided. And that would have been helpful to know as a board member, to be able to say, oh, do we have to do it that way? Couldn't we make that longer? Couldn't we make that shorter? I know that covenants, Gary, you presented to the board 6 months ago.
August.
August, a review you had done on status of things and how long things took. So there's some opportunities for review and saying, can we do it better?
And the other thing we did was we tried to go by the hierarchy of source of authority. So if there is, you see the charters in there, and then you may have a resolution, which is every year the board will update their resolutions for the committees, and then you'll have some just internal operating procedures. It's our operating procedures. They can change if they don't make sense, if they're not efficient enough, we can modify and adjust them. But we tried to give you from that hierarchy down. And then there's some legal updates also on changes to the law, so you can see how that affected the Covenants Committee.
And that was
That's page 31 in section 4.
So that actually, okay.
Rachel did a great job of numbering these so that you can find this stuff pretty easily. It's great.
Applause to Rachel. I hope the camera picks that up.
Susan helped yesterday getting confused.
Did you have a sleeping bag out here last night?
No, actually, it's a good team.
Susan did, but won't acknowledge it.
No, I did not.
I was throwing stuff at her today, and it was already numbered. I was like, oh, great, I'm messing everything up. So.
Is there anything we want for now? I know we're going to set up a briefing before the appeals meeting. That's really the context, is it not?
That's what I would like. I think having this is an amazing resource. Thank you. I think just having the time to read through it and then have some intelligent questions to ask, so that when we go in as new members for the appeal process, we have some idea what's coming.
David,
Yes, please.
that next meeting, we will have Tom Slayton there, is that correct?
No, incorrect. It actually got rescheduled for that. So it's just a regular appeal meeting, no attorneys.
But they still want to have that meeting, it just won't
Yes.
be until May.
Is
Right?
it with the same, do we have the same person that we would have had the attorney for?
No, they will be coming in May.
Okay.
But there will be an appeals meeting in April,
Yes.
still. Okay.
Just your attorney one will be in May now. That agenda item has been moved to May, so the attorneys will be moving to May also.
And the May meeting is not yet scheduled.
Correct.
And there's only one appeal that we're hearing?
No multiple.
Oh,
Okay? If they show. That's all.
Right, if they show.
You'll still hear it, though,
Yeah, we-
even
Yeah,
if they're
we'll still
there.
We still hear it.
In
yeah.
absentia.
Now, Tony will give us a list of all the appeals that are due that day, probably about 3 or 4 days in
Yeah.
advance. Good time to go out and look at the places too, and see if they've corrected the deficiencies that are listed, and find out what their issues are. And then, because they boil down to, they may be an ARC appeal where they're appealing the ARC's decision whether they get billed or not, or their change of structure, or it could be a covenants appeal, which is determining whether fines should be removed or
Reduced.
lowered or something like that.
I just want to clarify what I just heard. It is permissible and encouraged for us as individual board members to go inspect these properties?
You can?
Sure.
Is that
So you're not
encouraged?
expecting,
Is it-
you're going to have a list of what the deficiencies were, and I would just go make sure that they've been completed.
And
Drive-by.
Jackson, I think this may be helpful. When you get the packet, Tony's going to give you a complete packet for each appeal item, and it's going to have a management summary with the history timeline of what took place, what our recommendations are, what the covenant or ARC committee's recommendations are. So that'll be on there. And then all the historical information along with that property, the pictures, the appeal form the application they fill out, everything that has gone along with that property, pictures, it'll all be in that packet. So what Jack is alluding to is that prior to the appeal meeting, it is acceptable to go by the house and look at it yourself so you can see it in person as opposed to just the pictures.
And you will get pictures that day of the house too.
At the meeting, yeah, there'll be pictures.
So we're fact finders?
No, you're just looking at it to see how it looks compared to, so just if someone says, I want to keep awnings that the ARC won't allow me to keep, You can drive by and look at the awnings yourself. You can look at the design guidelines that are in there. You can read Jeffrey Mallon's opinion on whether or not it should be there. But it doesn't hurt to just go by and look at it and say, okay, now I've seen what it looks like. Now I know a little bit more about what they're talking about.
I'm just thinking in the context of law, where typically the people making a decision do not go out and view the crime scene. So it seems a little weird to me that we go out and do that, but if that's the practice, okay.
Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. So
Okay.
it's permissible, but not
Okay.
essential.
Great, thank
Just
you.
if whatever helps you make a decision.
I went by what they viewed, what they gave us. So.
You didn't
Enough for
drive
now?
by.
We got to roll.
Enough for now? Ready to roll?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was easy, right?
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
being
you.
here. So we have on our agenda the 5 management and administrative items, and then a couple of things to look ahead in terms of future agendas. CROA Board of Conduct. We have a revised version. I had some editorial suggestions, and then we had,
I just printed.
there were minor editorial, but then Steve added a draft on communications. And then I think it was Brian who added, and I wasn't sure what you wanted there. So just in terms of the editorial, I added gender to protected class. I don't know, we're not discriminating based on gender. I mean, we have others there. Why didn't we have gender? But I suggest we add that. Do you see that? It was under conduct.
Which letter?
It's letter J.
Oh,
Gender was not there before. Is that okay with the board?
yep.
Yes, sir.
And then I added, under communication, Steve did the draft, as I recall. Is that correct, based on our discussion last week?
What was it?
Steve did the draft
Yes.
of the communication, and I added where it says will be inclusive of all board members. In these instances, all is on line 4 under item L,
I take exception to L.
okay,
I mean,
as a whole,
totally. Whenever possible is vague to me.
okay?
I don't think that's appropriate. And besides that, like I said, we're a corporation, okay? We're not subject to the sunshine laws. 720 is what guides us. For 7.5 years, I've sat on the board, and the code of conduct we had was fine. I can understand the modifications you're having there with gender and inclusive of all board members, but I don't see a reason for tying us so close together, especially the discussions we've had already where people are talking about emailing various things back and forth. And we've had a number of emails this last week that, that we couldn't have had. So I don't see it as an appropriate addition. And I question, what penalty are you going to apply to that to us? And who's going to make the decision that whenever possible is appropriate?
David, I actually see it quite differently. If it's an email that you don't want to see, Jack, you can simply delete it. That's fine. I have sat on that side for less than you've sat on this side, and the frustrations that I had on that side are what I'm bringing here. And I think communication would be beneficial for the entire community if it stayed between the board as often and as transparent as possible.
I don't think you can delete it, though, because it's public record. I think you have to still maintain it.
It's his personal email, but
Oh, wait, is it personal emails we're talking about?
The emails amongst us, it goes through his email address, but don't read it. I will continue any emails I send, I will send to every member up here. There will never be an email that goes just to one.
That's not the direction I'm going. I'm just saying, whenever possible is just a vague term, okay? I don't agree with it.
So backing up a couple levels, these standards of conduct historically came from where and why? Having standards of conduct, where did they come from?
I
know it's way before your
Yeah, I
time.
don't know the exact year. It was before I got here, but I think it's historical boards putting together along with some legal input on the code of conduct. And it's an opportunity for you all to sign and agree on the way you're going to conduct yourself over the next year until the next election.
And
It was a board resolution not long after you took charge of celebration. I think, Jack, it was about 2008, 2009. It was a resolution the board passed.
so it goes back, way back to, probably to one of your early years on the board?
Before I got on.
Okay.
Going to what I wrote last week, I wondered if we should start with a paragraph saying, and we had this meeting with Don Slayton, we should say these are the legal requirements for the board. And then maybe we go to the second paragraph here, which says, in the spirit of good communication, the board is going to strive to copy each other on all emails and text. Well, I've already said you can't have more than 4 people personally, because at the end of the day, we can't enforce a darn thing. We've heard that. So it's almost like we have a paragraph, here's the law, we are going to stick with the law, And in the spirit of good communication, we're going to do what we're striving for here. And I think then at least this is what we're trying to accomplish. But we can't control what any 2 or 3 people do here.
Along that point, if any board member after signing this breaches any of these, the breach of conduct is spelled out, but Article 3, Section 3.5 just lays out that you would have to get a membership vote to remove a board member. The only way a board member could be removed is if they're 90 days past due on their assessments, or they have fines, or they don't show up to 3 consecutive meetings. That's the only authority that you all have to remove a board member. So while it says you'll do it, it is up to the community then if they feel like the board member's not meeting their responsibilities.
I think Brian's got a good idea. I like that. But there's also no mention of oral communication in here that I know.
Well, that's why I wanted to see the law, because the law says if any 4 of us are together. Because as an example, when we were at the Windsor grand opening, I had a couple people approaching me. If Vaughn was out of town, but if Vaughn and I'd been together and someone wants to approach me and talk to me, I can't say, sorry, I can't talk to you. I could do that if there's 5 of us together. So I'm going to listen to 2 people, but in the spirit of communication, I'll try to tell people, and I certainly want to copy everybody on the emails. I talked about that and stuff like today. So I get exactly what we're trying to do here. So here's the law, here's what we're going to try to do in spirit, and we're already saying we're going to have more meetings, more workshops, and do a lot of stuff like that so that the public is aware. At the end of the day, we got to try to build public trust by how we behave.
So when you're separating those out, what the law requires?
So I would start with the first paragraph. Tom Slayton did it. I'm sure that Susan or Steve can write it in their sleep. And, then here's the law, in the spirit of communication, here's how we're going to go further, and strive to go further in the spirit of good communication. Is that fair, Steve?
So in the spirit of communication, what we already have written is appropriate. We just need to have a paragraph before this saying, here's the law.
Jack, could you live with that?
Is that what we're saying?
I don't know, what if we don't sign it? What does it mean?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I asked, what if we don't sign it? What if we don't unanimously approve it? What does that mean?
From a legal standpoint?
Yeah,
Section 3.5, Article 3, Section 3.5 of the bylaws would be the breach of conduct. I mean, it would require a community vote to remove a board member.
right.
You could just...
Are you saying like when, for example, some of the emails come in from the residents and they need an answer on something, like the gentleman here, that we're strapped by that because we can't communicate with each other? Or,
Yes, I think we are.
I mean, I agree, because if Kevin has to bring every email that comes to the board or to a workshop, the problem is, and it is being ignored, but we have to make so many decisions on some of the stuff, the just minor answers, not anything that require a vote. That part is hard, and I think it's hard for you guys to see it being newer, but I mean, I see part of his point.
Where I'm standing is the fact of just communication as a whole. I'm not saying coming to a vote, I'm saying if an email comes to me from a resident or from another board member, my reply is going to make everybody aware of that reply. Am I misunderstanding?
Well, I mean, are we able to help resolve anything other than, to this person, other than coming
Based
to a
on the
meeting?
previous meeting that we had, it's going to be management is going to focus on day to day. And if management has an issue with black or white and there's a gray area, then it comes to a workshop or a meeting and we discuss and see how we can address it. Apart from that, Management are the professionals that are being paid. We're here to help them.
Well, the email
refer
that
to
you
management.
received is really a great case study.
Yeah.
The email came to the entire board. You replied and said, we'll hear from management. I've answered. And you all haven't changed or gone against what my direction was on what I've said. Now, we've seen what I've said we'll see. Once I answer, 10 more questions come along with that, and we're trying to keep up with those answers. But I think that it's worked the way, in the spirit of what you were trying to accomplish, that particular email has worked up to this point.
And did that work for you?
I think it was great.
To me, that's what we should be doing, is not solving residents' problems, but referring residents to the problem solvers.
Just understand the person still didn't like my answer.
Right.
But-
Back and forth, yeah.
Gary Hudspeth, an unintended consequence. If a single resident emails one member of the board with an opinion, then if the member of the board requires to reply to that resident, infoing all the other members of the board, and the residents of Celebration know that, they're going to probably quit emailing people because they know their email to you is going to be spread among everyone. So people will quit writing you.
I think what you want to do is make sure you're not portraying yourself as speaking on behalf of the board. And Kevin did that. He said, we've received your information, we're going to let management answer. We answered and...
Forward it to the proper authority.
Right.
But we have designated our secretary as the person to respond to these general requests. So we're forwarding these requests to...
If we get individual requests, we can...
Yeah. I think what Jack's talking about, though, is outside of this incident. He's talking about more of you all communicating amongst each other.
Right.
Well, it's my understanding that what we generally agreed to at the last meeting was that we were going to try this process for a while and see how it worked, to see if it was operable or not. There are 3 of you that have previous board experience, and I want to be respectful of that, but I also want to acknowledge that 4 of us ran a campaign primarily focused on transparency and openness. And I don't feel like I can have run that campaign and then turn around and say, nope, not Section L, I'm getting rid of that, we're going to continue to operate the same way we've operated. Now, if it turns out that it is unworkable, it is impractical, we cannot do our work, then I'm willing to come back and revisit that in this forum in front of the public and say, it doesn't work, we can't make it happen. I'd like to have the opportunity, though, for another month or so to at least try it and see what happens. And if Gary's right, if people stop emailing us, I think that's unlikely to happen, truthfully. I mean, if you want to send me an email, Gary, that you don't like Vaughn, okay. I mean, Vaughn's a big boy, he can handle it. I don't think any of us did this for a popularity contest, so I don't think that's much of a problem. But I think to Debbie's concern and to Jack's concern, if it really gets in the way of our ability to manage the business of the board, then I think we bring that back and we discuss it. Is that fair enough?
Which is exactly what I'm proposing.
So do we wait a month to sign it?
Well, the next
we do it
scheduled meeting is the April meeting. So that's the day we have on here as your April board meeting.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
We have strategic goals now with 2 and sometimes 3 people that are attached to those. Our emails between each of us, are that supposed to be CC'd to the entire board? Everything we do?
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to see
Yes.
more emails than you've ever seen before now.
Yes. My view is yes. We all have devices, electronic devices in front of us. We're all putting things in folders. I think it's inconvenient. I agree, it's inconvenient, but I don't think that's a reason to not do it.
So the point was, let's try management things.
Yeah.
Is that going to work? Don't know.
So that's the first time I ever attended. I don't know.
I did not see any notification of that meeting anywhere. And so I appreciate you sharing that you were going to it, because that was the only way.
Yeah, I sent an email out that I was attending.
It shouldn't come to that. It should be posted on the website, whatever the case is. Teleservice app, tells us whatever it may be.
If it's a resolution task force, I think that as we have that conversation, I feel it's going to be, all of those are going to be posted from now on.
Okay.
But this was more of a meeting to get together. At first, it was more of a group meeting.
Public? Or close.
It was more closed at first to talk about the purpose of what we wanted to accomplish. It can certainly be a resolution task force that we want in the open and anyone can attend. In fact, we wouldn't have kicked anybody out if they did show up, but
That's what I'm saying.
I think it's just a matter of making sure that
I mean,
we
it's not like
get
a
the
board
direction
meeting
and
where
we're
you're
moving that way.
required in a certain, within a certain number of days to post it, but at least it can be put out that, hey, if you want to come and listen to what's going on, come on and sit in if you want. I don't have any, I think it's a good idea.
So let's reach closure for now on the code of conduct. Are we talking about a rewrite?
Can we come back and rewrite L and have it ready for review at our next?
Yeah, workshop.
You want me to add what does the law say?
What does the law say?
What does the law say?
And then
I think
in the
we need to add
spirit
something
of
in there about
transparent
oral
communication, the
communication.
CROA board will strive to, and then the same paragraph. So I need to write what does the law say?
Right.
So is that what you meant by legal requirements? Was that, okay, that's the context of, okay.
I want people to know, here's the law.
Here's the law.
Here's what we're going to strive to
And here's what
do,
we're striving for.
And if
That's
you
all.
want to fire us, God bless you.
So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
What's up there on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so we'll bring that back. Next item on the agenda was town hall meetings, format and scheduling.
Want to move that in the interest of time? So we have a.
For time sensitivity.
We do have a resident here that had written you a letter.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've discussed that.
So what do you want to deal with next? You want to defer town hall meetings?
Yeah, let's go to the resident letter, and then we'll come
So-
back with that
So
time.
item D was response to resident requests, and we were just talking about that.
Yeah.
So
We handle that and these are the ones-
it's like, what is our protocol when a resident has a request?
So from what was brought up last week, and I don't know if Steve, you might be able to help with this, but what was brought up last week was if a resident writes an email to the entire board, the secretary will reply.
Right.
If it's sent to an individual board member, I believe it gets forwarded off to the secretary. Is that the same comment that was, is that what we discussed last week?
We'll just forward it to you.
And then I'll respond, of course, to encompass everybody.
And letting the person know that it's being forwarded to the secretary for a response.
That's fair.
So they know that somebody's going to answer.
That's fair.
And there was a email that went to every board member about green technology. Was it a two-page memo that I'd seen? I think you'd seen that before, like a year ago. So that would be, I think, was that, no, that wasn't. And then there was another, well, that one would be appropriate for that goal area 2, I think, where we're talking about green.
Green, yep.
For them to take that under advisement and to notify that person that, you know, our goal area, we're looking at some green things, and maybe we can talk with you.
I mean, we don't want to look like somebody responds or sends Brian an email, and Brian says, well, I'm going to send this, in general, I'm going to send this to Kevin. We want them to know we're not, you know, passing the buck. That's just the way we're set up to respond to these things, I think. Is that how we want to, you don't want them to think that, well, I don't care about
If we're
you.
going to do that, it would be good maybe if Kevin ghost wrote a paragraph or a few sentences that we could all have a consistent way of forwarding them. I think it would be good, so that we don't end up with 6 or 7 different messages that are totally confusing.
Agreed.
So I have no problem with Kevin, the secretary, being the person who responds, but then here's what I ought to say. And I'm probably just going to have it in a Word document and copy it and insert it, and, but at least then we got consistent communication, or otherwise I think it'll be confusing.
Probably, maybe in that communication to Kevin, along with the email, we can send to the group comments. If you may have, they may be asking you because you have some information about this, and get forwarded, so at least he can, you know, have any knowledge you may have at the
The
top.
purpose, I believe, of my reply is to say we received it. Steve and management will be copied on it, so they can go ahead and address it in a black and white. And if it's not in black and white, it's in gray and it gets discussed here. That's it.
It comes to a future board
I
meeting
mean, we need to
or
get
workshop.
consistency in the
Right.
community,
Yeah.
and until we get that, everybody's going to be writing one board member, one staff member, so they can get what they need for their personal
Yes.
position. And listen, in business, that's perfectly fine, but this is a community of alphas, so we all are going to try that, and it doesn't work. So we need to be consistent and set that groundwork, so that way your job is a little easier, which means we have less to worry about on this end, because everything is, again, black and white.
So you'll draft something that we can
Yeah.
insert
I'll
in?
draft something for that.
And I think
As
you're
long as
right, Kevin. There are
everybody
going to
agrees
be
with
two different types of those emails. Like, one of them is going to be, what does the board think about this? You're bringing that back here to the
Right.
public. Or it'll be, I don't like this operational thing, and that's when you pass it on to management. Something happened, somebody didn't get what they wanted, and then we would work to fix that.
And
Or
then
you
they can
would-
come to a meeting and we can.
Or if
discuss
it's
that
a
and
policy thing, like this last one was, we would say, this is the policy, this is the way it's being implemented. If it needs to be talked about changing the policy, it's back here to change the policy.
Come to a meeting to discuss.
There will be some things that are not part, many things that are not part of CROA's responsibility that will be sent to us. If we know that it really is a CDD issue, do we refer it to Steve, who can then refer it to CDD, or do we refer it directly to CDD?
I'd like to
Or
take
both.
ownership of the concerns.
You follow the question?
Yeah, for management, for us to get involved with another board, I don't think that's going to be the best way to do it, but we would need to go ahead and refer them to you,
I
at
think
which
we-
point
I'm sorry.
we explain the process.
Yeah, I was going to say, that
That is.
right.
Duke
CDD,
Power,
county, Duke, whatever,
county,
right?
the
And
roads
in
of the
time-
county. We don't do it all.
Right.
In
We're a
time, the
homeowners
community
association.
will be educated on where the concerns can be addressed.
For example, that email that came in from Mr. Irwin, and he's here, did you want to,
Well, I will pull up exactly what I wrote, so we can go ahead and discuss.
did you want to come up?
Sure. So Irwin sent an email to Debbie and David, I believe it was on Tuesday.
Yes.
And this was regarding, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. First of all, let me start off by saying that I sent the email because on your website, it has a line to click to send to all board members.
Yeah.
Okay? It didn't work for me. It may be my computer, it may be the program, I have no idea. I picked the top 2 people on the list, which is you two, and sent it there. I did get a very quick reply from
Okay,
Kevin.
we then forward it on to the board.
Yeah, which was wonderful.
That's how we do things.
Which basically
Started the conversation.
either yes or no that there was surprise what I said regarding a sign that went up about 7-Eleven on the Celebration Boulevard.
Right.
So that's my issue. But the communication, if you had, not to bore you to tears, but I had another issue a while back, sent it in here to Town Hall. 2 weeks later, I still didn't get a response from the person that it was forwarded to. I finally got an answer.
Is that a board member or?
It was
part of
somebody in
staff?
the building, not a board member. Okay. So I don't know, being a new resident, but very honestly, having a 25-year history with Celebration. All right, so I know what the mission and the vision was supposed to be for Disney, and I worked with Celebration with Florida Hospital. Okay, it was part of a strategic alliance with them. So I was here when the shovel went in the ground. So my issue, and I know you're not going to solve it, is I don't remember an issue, the vision of Celebration being a 7-Eleven, and now I hear a McDonald's. Okay, this is insane. I also, for your discussion, whenever you get to it, I'm learning more since I had to go look. So now I see a Celebration Boulevard with the potential of an island village on one end with 1,100 and God knows how many houses on it that continues up to the rentals, which is fine, housing. Then there's a 21-acre shopping center with 796 parking spaces that continues on to a McDonald's, a 7-Eleven, and I have no idea what else. Then continues down to storage units, Windsor, nursing home, office buildings, and dead ends at the library.
And a hotel in that same
I
complex.
just heard that from Gary, thank you, and a hotel.
As we learned last night.
Right, and I live in Spring Lake, and along that stretch now is one light at World Drive, and not a stop sign in sight. So if I want to get out of Ponce or anywhere else, it's going to be real difficult. But bringing it back is, I have no idea, being new, what this board has a responsibility for to fighting against a 7-Eleven and a McDonald's going in Celebration. And you can tell me Disney owns it, you can tell me all the rest of that stuff, but you're willing to stand up to the county because of a recreational facility. I don't know what iteration, but how did it get to this point where there's going to be McDonald's and a 7-Eleven over there?
Steve, you want to-
Those are my issues.
I'll back those
Well-
up.
And I know it's money.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you the facts. TCC owns that land, and TCC sold that land to a McDonald's and a 7-Eleven. They don't come and get permission from the CROA board to do that. I think that they have to work to the county and permitting and everything else, but they essentially sold the land, and that's who bought it. Now TCC does have strict design guidelines, and they look sell and who they're going to sell it to, but we're CROA management, CROA management, we're not asked our opinion on it or to bring it back to you for your opinions on it.
Do you know what the hotel's going to be?
No.
I don't know. In fact, I heard the hotel. I mean, I always hear speculation because people talk about different things. But TCC usually holds that pretty tight until they know absolutely for sure what it is. And last night was the first time that I heard hotel in apartments. in
So
that
last
location.
night at the CDD meeting, a new person, representative from the Celebration Company named Marty Palankowski, made a presentation, talked about 7-Eleven and talked about McDonald's, and someone said something about Wawa, and he says, well, Wawa has a fixed structure, 7-Eleven will be done with a different kind of design that would meet their needs. Yes, there will be a gas station there too, he said. He also said that the hotel unit, he called it a multi-use, which included multifamily and hotel.
Which is
His words,
I believe.
multifamily. Don't know what that translates to.
Yeah, this is kind of interesting. Back around 2003, was it 2003 that we all marched down to the county and complained to the commissioners about a Four-Season hotel that was supposed to go in down that section there? Do you remember that, Jackson? I think there's probably about 100 of us there in the audience there, but Four-Season eventually moved out to where
They are now, yeah.
well, the golf course is over there in Disney, but Disney never tells us anything.
No.
We finally hear about it, it's usually too late. Unfortunately, we're a homeowners association, and our dimensions are within this area here. Canoa would be the first person that we, well, and they're not even subject to Canoa until it's closed, the deal's closed, and they transfer it over to, they get a closure on the thing. So,
Yeah, I wouldn't guess that this iteration of the board has any knowledge or
Well,
responsibility for
our only hope right now is, like, for example, with Mattamy building down there in Island Village, not to have some of the things repeated that occurred in Spring Lake occur again, and we don't even have a right to be on to talk to them, but we'd like to have a seat there and at least try and tell them, hey, this is what went wrong, don't let it happen again, type thing.
The difference with Mattamy, though, is that Mattamy is going to have CROA common areas that you will then inherit and have to take care of moving forward. So I imagine you're going to have some say in.
Well, I disagree, Steve, because we had no say in the muse that we had in Spring Lake.
Well, I'm speaking from the perspective of the conversations with Bennett
Okay.
up to this point.
Okay.
They want to engage with the community, and that's why they had their town hall meeting before they've even done their road and their bridge. So I don't know that you're going to have the final say over what goes down there, but you're going to have voice, I think, to at least have those discussions and talk about it.
One thing I'd like to see, and communication, I'm going to sound like broken record when it comes down to this. CJC sits on the board, and this is why an email that I sent out a few minutes afterwards was regarding CJC. And the first meeting that I believe it's Jackson and myself will be sitting on this board doesn't happen until 10 weeks after we were assigned those seats. CJC is the joint committee between CROA and the Canoa, the non-residential, and that takes 3 seats that are from TCC, Disney Celebration Company, and 2 seats of CROA. Those members of TCC were well aware of these things happening. Can we have what can we do to pull this information? Of course, when it comes down to contracts, they don't have to give them. But I go ahead and I pull up this apartment complex and hotel that's happening on the boulevard that majority of us just found out about. This happened, and it was published on the Kettler website, apparently the company behind it, June 19th of last year. At no point could the Celebration Company have sent a CJC meeting that this is coming. At no point they could have shared that with us. That's my concern, is there's no reason for this communication to be hidden.
Could I just make a comment? Again, it's not directed personally at the new board. But as a new resident, I get communication as to how the letters on my mailbox should be. But we don't know that all of this stuff is going on out there. This is the same, if you took those points from your strategic plan, it fails at Celebration Boulevard. Because you just, could I ask a question just personally? Anybody here lived in Spring Break or Sienna? Besides him? All right, so we're stuck with it. All right, you won't. You'll have to deal with the traffic problem if you get all of that stuff going on. But we're stuck with it out there.
Go ahead. Gary.
I'm trying to present, I did have an opinion when I came here the last time I sat in this chair, but I'm just trying to bring facts. I will say that I was at the CDD meeting sometime early summer. You said that was posted June. Somewhere around then, when the TCC guy and Jerry, our deputy, mentioned that this was going to be built. And everybody went, well, that's interesting. He was informing CDD that that was on the plan. He made the announcement about the same time that went up. And then there was silence. I have a good, you're right. Why didn't TCC take the extra step and inform other people by other methods? But it was during that meeting that it came out in the open. So it has been announced.
Structurally, one of the things that has frustrated me from day one in Celebration is that Disney created these individual entities and then hamstrung each one of them with just enough power to get themselves in trouble and not enough power to get themselves out. And as long as Disney controlled all of those boards, it wasn't really a big issue. But last night, as we heard at the CDD meeting, the CDD is going to float the bonds for Island Village and be on the hook for those bonds. Mattamy wants to build a southern access point off 429 into the Island Village. And all of those things impact us as residential owners, but we as CROA have little or no actual authority in those areas. And yet, our ability to learn these things, if we had not been at the meeting last night, we wouldn't know. So somehow, procedurally, systemically, we have to find a better way to work with CDD and with CJC and with CROA so that there is early warning, not late information. I mean, I heard about the access off 429, but then I found out today that Mattamy said explicitly at their meeting a week ago they weren't going to build a southern access route out of the Island Village.
But what I heard was a temporary construction access.
Is it temporary construction or is it just?
That's what I heard.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what I heard.
So that they could move the construction vehicles in.
But it wouldn't be a permanent access.
For construction, so they
But
can
who's
build.
to say the county can't come in later on and say it worked once?
I understand.
Nothing permanent.
For traffic flow, we're going to require it.
Right.
And so the point I just want to make, and I know we're racing the
We've got
clock
10
here,
minutes.
is that part of what our strategic planning is, with respect to dealing with other organizations, is that apparently we have to be the adults in the room. I don't get the feeling that these other organizations are yet willing to share information and resources. I mean, we should have had that interlocal agreement last night. It wasn't a big deal to get that, or this morning. And we're still pushing to get that. We're going to have to find a way to guide those other entities if we're going to make the kind of progress we need around places like Island Village, or we're going to be repeating Mr. Baker's problem over and over and over again.
And just a little comedic comment. I think maybe everybody will wake up when they decide to put a T-shirt shop next door to you here.
So you're right. So in our 8 minutes remaining, we can't cover everything. What's urgent? Is any of this town hall meetings, county commissioners, subcommittee, is any of that urgent? I know, talked about CHAC meeting. While you're doing that, let me pass this around as a now not up-to-date advanced organizer. So just in terms of trying to move things forward, next week's workshop agenda, we need to have, sorry, Brian, I did not put budget overview on there. So we need to do budget overview. We talked about the resolution on the task force on the community center.
Just doing the reserve accounts, right? Not a complete budget, everything, but just.
What-
No. It was a thumbnail.
Okay, so what,
Okay.
just so I could, give me 2 minutes, and if we run over 15 minutes, I think we'll live with it. What I want to do is I'm going to actually, on a high-level summary, talk about 14, 15, 16, and 17 actuals, so we form a baseline, and 18, I'm doing very high-level financial statement, very high-level balance sheet, cash on hand, so that we can do a Q&A session of really how I do it, and that we can sit there and people can be comfortable, this is how much cash we have, this is how that flows in, and it, based upon a historical norm, this is what we could expect into the future as reasonable business people. That's what I'm doing.
Okay.
But it'll take a half hour,
Okay.
40
half
minutes.
hour. And so I wanted to put somewhere that we talk about athletic fields, particularly the concession stand idea. I thought that Debbie and I could brief you on the February survey results, but we'll send that out ahead of time so we can discuss if needed. At some point, we need to talk soon about the May survey, and one of the examples, I wrote website, which means maybe one of the topic areas is what would residents like to see in a website? Because the prior board budgeted money for a revamped website, and many of us have complained over the years about the current website. That makes sense? We had talked about parliamentarian. None of these have to be next time, but this is just a straw person. We do need to talk about July 4th events. We have survey data that's
It
separate.
was not scheduled when we did the budget workshops
Right.
back in October
Right.
to do a July 4th event, other than our traditional parade that we
Well,
did.
parade, but we just need to talk, if the board is going to want something, we need to talk about that sooner rather than later.
Well, and our recommendation is going to be strongly against it because all of our planning for the year has
Right.
been built around not doing something
Right.
on 4th of July.
So-
So if we're going to do it
No
sooner than later, definitely.
Fireworks and events are two different discussions.
Right.
So
We'll discuss.
the following, I'm just proposing, because I heard in our strategic planning, we need to be talking about downtown. So it doesn't mean that we have to do it that time. And we do need to talk about newspaper, because there was a discussion with the prior board about newspaper converting to a magazine-type format, which was the original Celebration publication. And then I started to build an agenda for driving around. We have that drive around.
You get these times.
Do I have them backwards?
That's all right. We fix that.
Oh, I do have it reversed, thank you. Yeah, the drive, yeah. So move drive around is 1 to 5, and the meeting is 5 to 7. Yeah. And then it's just starting to build a board meeting agenda. And then future means at some point, particularly based on last year's hurricane, and then was it the last week or this week when we had that?
It was Tuesday.
Tuesday, okay, 2 days ago, when we had that shutdown and so forth. What are our procedures for that, and what do we do and why? Then the process of communication and management updates, the Wednesday meetings, and what we were talking about earlier today. So what are our priorities for next Wednesday?
I think you've listed.
Half hour, we'll start with budget. Is that okay?
Fine.
You need board code of conduct also.
Board code of conduct, thank you.
But can we float things in advance? Like I'll float some financial documents in
Sure.
advance. You can float a revised, I mean,
If
at
you
least then
float
we can
things, that
review things.
Gives us some jumpstart. Budget overview. July 4th, I think, is essential next week to at least talk about that.
Interlocal, we said we had
We
to,
had interlocal, and we had the resolution on the task.
and I think we got to talk about the athletic fields. I mean, they kind of go ABC.
Okay? You want to talk about athletic fields next week?
It's on here, Mr. Consent.
We have 2 hours, 5 to 7.
Is 5 to 7 enough, or do we need to just bite the bullet, make it 5 to 8? I'm just asking.
What do you want?
5 to 8.
Yes, no?
What's that, bite the bullet, or?
Yeah, 5 to 8.
5 to 8, I'm fine.
We
Okay
okay?
with you guys?
Oh, that's right, you guys were,
That's,
Oh, that's
we're trying to make it easier for them
I
to
did schedule
get home.
something at 7 o'clock. I coach Little League as a volunteer here in town, so I did schedule that. I can find an assistant coach if we feel like it needs to go to 8. I'm okay with that, but that's the.
How about if we try to get done by 7?
Let's
That would be
try
great.
5 to 7.
Yeah, that would be
Okay,
great.
5 to
If not,
7,
I can
5 to
have
7.
assistants do it.
Let's do 5 to 7.
We probably won't win if I'm not out there coaching. I'm just kidding.
So we have budget overview, board code of conduct, task force, interlocal agreement, and a big chunk on athletic fields.
Yeah.
And Steve, you probably have some more updated information, timelines.
I do, yeah, I have some information
For-
to share
for
with
next
you next week.
All right, so last question is, did this process work for a board workshop, this format, not having residents speak for 3 minutes and then shut it off, having residents come to the table? Was that okay for you?
I think the resident comments are valuable information for us, and
Absolutely.
they should be able to,
Yeah.
I mean, not take over the meeting, but I think 3 minutes is kind of limiting.
Yeah, and before we have any discussion on anything, at the beginning, it felt a little
And have it
stiff.
have it intermixed with the
Was this
meeting.
okay for the residents who are here?
It's timely.
Timely? Yeah, it ties right into,
Right.
and again, sorry you have to come up, but it's the microphone thing. Anything else? We're at 4 o'clock.
Nice job.
Real quick, sorry, a couple things that we were talking about for this week. Can we touch base on those?
Okay.
Just things, the recreation committee that one resident emailed regarding the sharks and things like that, is that resolved with management?
That's what Steve
Is that
referenced, where
underway?
he answered a lot of questions and it generated more.
Yeah, and just to give you an update, we're working on trying to, the program's new, so we're working on modifying it so that we can try and meet the needs of everybody. And I think one of the offers was doing something kind of like what we've been doing, so that if people don't want to be more competitive, they can still sign up for that program. So we are working on it. The criticism about the prices going out wrong, it's fair, and there should be accountability for us. We made a mistake, and we figured out how it happened, and we're going to fix it so it doesn't happen again. But from the programming standpoint, I think the rationale and the logic behind the recreation program plan and moving in that direction, to me, it makes sense, and I would back it up and ask you to support it also, because it was a lot of hard work by a lot of volunteers in the community to put this program plan together.
Okay, so the resident and management, they've concluded, or they're...
Well, I
they're
don't know
underway?
if the resident is still 100% in agreement with what we're saying, but we are working to try and come up with a solution for that.
And then I know it's funny enough, the 7-Eleven situation, last week I brought it up on the website, and it was on there, and it's under restaurants. I know we're going to talk about the website later on. What is actually happening? I mean, when this website is live, what's going on? I know there's a third party. Are we just leaving, this is what we look like on the internet. This is what Celebration looks like, is how that website is.
Right.
Somebody that's looking to buy here, that's what they look at.
Yeah, the plan is to redo the entire website and hire a professional firm and pay for it to be managed and supported by this firm. So what you have now, we don't have a lot of flexibility to change it. It's a cookie cutter kind of website, so it's...
But the information that's on there, who
We
manages
can
that?
change information on there,
Okay,
yes.
because we have businesses that are closed on there, we have pages that don't have any details, we have businesses that are under different categories. If we, when management has downtime, or any of the staff can, I don't know if they could just...
So the question is, how much do we want to look at the current website, and how quickly would we have a replacement?
What can we correct that's small things now, compared to the big picture
Can you
that we can work
identify
on later on?
some? You just
Yeah,
did
I can get a list together of some
Just
things that I say.
Send that, we can
I'll share that with
deactivate
everybody.
something, take some things off. Yeah. The business thing, it's like, is that all we have? Well, we
It's-
have a lot of businesses here.
Yeah, it's not a huge issue, but when somebody logs online and they see 7-Eleven listed as a restaurant, as the first restaurant we have here in Celebration, I'm not proud of that.
That's something we can change.
These are the types
I
of
would
things I'm talking
highlight
about on the
those
website. So those are the things I'd like to address right away,
And
especially now.
Just saying, you'll have to.
We're ready to close? Thank you all for a good discussion. Enjoy your reading.